The lunch rush at La Lumiere had finally subsided, leaving behind the faint aroma of truffle oil and the quiet murmur of Manhattan's elite conducting business over dessert wine. Ethan Morrison stood near the kitchen doors, rolling his shoulders to ease the tension that had settled there during the past 4 hours of relentless service. He was good at this job, better than good. In the 6 months since he'd started waiting tables at one of New York's most exclusive French restaurants, he'd memorized every dish, every wine pairing, every unspoken rule about how to serve people who believed the world bent to their will. He moved with practiced efficiency, his dark hands steady as they carried plates worth more than his weekly rent, his smile professional but never quite reaching his eyes. Today was different, though. Ethan could feel it in the sudden hush that fell over the dining room, in the way heads turned toward the entrance like sunflowers seeking light. She had arrived. Isabella Zhao Williams didn't walk into La Lumiere. She commanded it. Her entrance was a performance, carefully choreographed over decades of knowing that every room she entered would rearrange itself around her presence. The maître d', Pierre, who normally treated everyone with the same cool professional distance, practically stumbled over himself to greet her. Ethan watched from his position near table 12 as she swept through the restaurant, her herm scarf draped with studied carelessness, her platinum hair styled in a way that probably cost more than his monthly salary. He recognized her immediately. Everyone did. Isabella Zhao Williams, tech billionaire, venture capitalist, the woman whose face graced the covers of Forbes and Fortune with headlines about disruption and innovation and breaking glass ceilings. The woman who, according to the whispered conversations Ethan had overheard among the staff, had a reputation for breaking more than just ceilings. Table 7, Pierre hissed, materializing beside Ethan with the urgency of a man facing execution. Mrs. Ashford Chen has requested service in her native language. She's particular about these things. Ethan felt something cold settle in his stomach. Table 7 was in his section. Of course it was. Her native language, Ethan asked, though he already knew the answer would complicate his afternoon. Mandarin, Pierre said, his accent making the word sound almost like a warning. She's meeting with the Taiwanese ambassador's wife. Everything must be perfect, Ethan, everything. The emphasis on his name carried weight, a reminder that waiters were replaceable, that rent didn't pay itself, that medical school applications required money he didn't yet have. Ethan nodded once sharply and straightened his already perfect posture. He could do this. He'd handled difficult customers before, navigated their casual cruelty with the same grace he brought to carrying 3 plates at once. This would be no different. But as Ethan approached table 7 with menus tucked under his arm, he caught the look in Isabella Zhao Williams's eyes. That particular gleam wealthy people got when they spotted an opportunity for entertainment at someone else's expense. He'd seen it before, in the customers who snapped their fingers to get his attention, who asked intrusive questions about where he was really from, who left him religious pamphlets instead of tips. Part 1 Sudden hush. "Good afternoon, ladies," Ethan said smoothly, his voice carrying the warm professionalism he'd perfected. "Welcome to La Lumiere. My name is Ethan, and I'll be taking care of you this afternoon." Isabella didn't even glance at him. She was deep in conversation with her companion, an elegant woman in her 50s whose jewelry probably cost more than a luxury car. They spoke in rapid Mandarin, and while Ethan caught a few words, his mother had a Chinese neighbor who taught him basic greetings years ago. The conversation was far beyond his comprehension. He waited. That was part of the job too, standing at attention while people decided whether to acknowledge your humanity. Finally, Isabella looked up. Her eyes traveled over him slowly, deliberately, in a way that made Ethan feel like an insect pinned to a display board. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Na hui xiu zhengwen ma," she asked, her tone sweet as poisoned honey. The question hung in the air. Ethan didn't need perfect Mandarin to understand she'd asked if he spoke Chinese. Around them, the restaurant seemed to hold its breath. This was a test, a trap, a game she'd played before. Ethan opened his mouth to respond, to politely explain that he didn't speak Mandarin but would be happy to fetch someone who did. The standard script for these situations. But something stopped him. Maybe it was the exhaustion from his double shift yesterday. Maybe it was the memory of the eviction notice he'd found on his apartment door last week. Maybe it was the accumulation of 1,000 small humiliations that had finally reached critical mass. Or maybe it was the way Isabella Zhao Williams sat there, so certain of how this moment would unfold, so confident in her ability to embarrass him in front of the entire restaurant. "Wo hui shuo yidian," Ethan replied quietly. "I speak a little." The lie came easily, smoothly, buying him exactly 3 seconds before Isabella would call his bluff and expose him as a fraud in front of everyone. 3 seconds to figure out how to survive what came next. Isabella's eyebrows rose, genuine surprise flickering across her face before her expression hardened into something sharper, more dangerous. "Hen hao," she said, and then launched into a rapid stream of Mandarin, gesturing at the menu with one perfectly manicured hand. Ethan stood frozen, his mind racing. He caught perhaps one word in 10, chicken, maybe spicy, something that might have been wine. The rest was a linguistic tsunami that would drown him if he didn't find solid ground fast. Every eye in the restaurant was on him now. He could feel them, the other diners, the staff, peer near the entrance practically vibrating with anxiety. This was the moment where he'd fail, where he'd be exposed, where Isabella Zhao Williams would get her entertainment and he'd probably get fired. Unless Ethan took a breath and did something he'd sworn he'd never do, something his mother would have called upon her church to pray over, something his sister would have laughed herself sick about. He decided to gamble everything on a secret he'd kept for 6 months. "Wo mingbai le furain," Ethan said, his pronunciation careful but confident. "I understand, madam. Ninjiang yao women de kao ya, zhang fen shu, bansui kao shikai he yi ping ling yi wu nian de Bordeaux. Wo hui ba nin de ti shu yaeku ga su chufang." The silence that followed was absolute. Ethan had just repeated back her order, the roasted duck, medium rare, with sautéed seasonal vegetables and a 2015 Bordeaux, along with a promise to relay her special requests to the kitchen. In perfect, fluent Mandarin. The shock on Isabella Zhao Williams's face was worth every risk. What do you think someone should do when they're being tested or humiliated? Should they meet fire with fire, or is there a better way? Part 2, full of surprises. The moment stretched like taffy, sweet and dangerous. Isabella's companion, the ambassador's wife, let out a delighted laugh, her hand flying to her mouth in genuine surprise. Around them, the restaurant seemed to exhale collectively, though Ethan knew the gossip would spread through the staff like wildfire within minutes. "Well," Isabella said, switching back to English, her voice carrying an edge Ethan couldn't quite identify. "That was unexpected." Ethan allowed himself the smallest smile. "We aim to exceed expectations at La Lumiere, Mrs. Ashford Chen. I'll have your order to the kitchen immediately. May I recommend our sommelier's pairing with the duck? Chef Laurent has prepared something special with the seasonal vegetables today, baby bok choy and shiitake mushrooms with a ginger reduction." He was back on script now, professional and unflappable, as if the past 60 seconds hadn't just upended what was supposed to be a humiliating encounter. Isabella studied him with new interest, her eyes sharp as cut glass. "You're full of surprises, Ethan," she said, and this time when she smiled, it looked almost genuine. Almost. Where did a waiter at a French restaurant learn to speak Mandarin? The question carried loaded weight, the assumption that someone like him, in a job like this, couldn't possibly have a story worth hearing. Ethan had learned to navigate these waters carefully. Give them enough to satisfy their curiosity, but never so much that they saw you as fully human. Humanity made people uncomfortable when it appeared in those they decided were meant to serve. My mother worked for a Chinese family in Brooklyn, Ethan said, which was true enough. I picked up bits and pieces growing up. What he didn't say, that he'd spent his undergraduate years at Columbia studying Mandarin alongside his pre-med requirements, that he'd done a summer abroad in Beijing, that he spoke 4 languages fluently and could stumble through 3 more. That information stayed locked away, tucked behind the professional mask every service worker learned to wear. Fascinating, Isabella murmured, though her tone suggested she found him more curious than actually interesting. The way one might find a clever parlor trick entertaining without caring about the magician who performed it. Ethan took their order to the kitchen, where Chef Laurent, a temperamental genius from Lyon who perfected the art of creating edible masterpieces while screaming at his staff, barely looked up from the salmon he was plating. Table 7, Laurent asked in rapid French. Oui, le canard pour Madame Ashford-Chen, Ethan replied, and Laurent's head snapped up. You're serving her. The chef's face cycled through several emotions before landing on grim sympathy. My condolences. I've heard stories. I'm sure they're all exaggerated, Ethan said, though he didn't believe it. The last time she dined here, she made Thomas cry. Thomas, the man served in the French Foreign Legion. Laurent shook his head. Be careful, mon ami. Women like that, they collect scalps. Back in the dining room, Ethan moved through his other tables with mechanical efficiency. Table 3 needed more water. Table 9 wanted dessert menus. Table 12's credit card needed processing. His body performed these tasks on autopilot while his mind wandered to the places it always went during slow moments. Medical school applications, MCAT scores, the letter from Mount Sinai that he'd read so many times he'd memorized every word. We regret to inform you that we cannot offer you admission at this time. While your academic credentials are impressive, we had an unprecedented number of qualified applicants. 27 years old, and Ethan Morrison was still waiting tables while his college roommate finished his residency at Johns Hopkins. Still living in a studio apartment in Washington Heights where the radiator clanged like a dying accordion and his neighbor's boyfriend screamed through the walls at 2 a.m. Still telling his mother that yes, he was fine, yes, he was happy, yes, everything was going according to plan. The lies came easier than the truth, that he was exhausted, that he'd applied to medical schools 3 years running and received nothing but rejections and wait lists that never materialized into acceptance letters, that the dream he'd carried since he was 12 years old, since the night his father had the heart attack and the paramedics took 45 minutes to arrive in their neighborhood, was slowly dying of exposure to reality. Ethan! Pierre's urgent whisper cut through his thoughts. The maitre d' looked pale, his usual composure cracking. Mrs. Ashford-Chen wants to speak with you, privately, in the wine cellar. Ethan felt his stomach drop. The wine cellar. Now, Pierre gripped his arm, his fingers tight enough to leave marks. And Ethan, whatever she wants, say yes. She's friends with the owner. She could have any of us fired with a phone call. The wine cellar at La Lumiere was less a cellar and more a temperature-controlled sanctuary, its walls lined with bottles worth more than most people's cars. Isabella Zhao Williams stood in the center of the room, backlit by soft lighting that made her look like she was posing for a magazine cover. She'd removed her scarf, and Ethan could see the elegant lines of her throat, the diamond necklace that probably cost more than his student loans. She was beautiful in the way expensive things were beautiful, polished, perfect, untouchable. Close the door, she said. Ethan did, his heart hammering. This was either very good or spectacularly bad, and he couldn't tell which. I want to know who you really are, Isabella said, turning to face him fully. And don't give me that sanitized biography you fed me upstairs. The Columbia graduate, the pre-med student who's been rejected from every medical school in the tri-state area, The boy from Bed-Stuy whose father died because the ambulance took too long. The words hit Ethan like physical blows. She'd looked into him. In the 20 minutes since he'd taken her order, Isabella Zhao Williams had somehow accessed his entire life story. "How did you?" "I have researchers," she said dismissively. "I didn't get where I am by accepting surface-level information. Now I'll ask you again. Who are you, Ethan Morrison?" He should have been angry. He should have felt violated. Instead, Ethan felt something unexpected: relief. Relief at being seen, really seen, for the first time in months. "I'm someone who's very good at his job," Ethan said carefully. "Someone who speaks 5 languages and can explain the Krebs cycle while calculating a tip in his head. Someone who spent the last 3 years being told he's not quite good enough, not quite what they're looking for, not quite the right fit. Because you're black." The words hung between them, blunt and unavoidable. Ethan had learned to dance around this reality, to package his experiences in palatable language that made white people comfortable. But Isabella Zhao Williams, for all her faults, didn't seem interested in comfort. "Among other reasons," Ethan said quietly. "I don't have the connections. I didn't go to the right undergraduate institution according to some admissions committees. My letters of recommendation came from state school professors instead of Ivy League legends. I've been working full-time to pay down debt instead of doing unpaid research internships." Isabella moved closer, and Ethan caught her perfume, something expensive and subtle that probably had a French name he couldn't pronounce. "What if I told you," she said slowly, "that I could change all of that? That I have connections at every major medical school in the country? That one phone call from me could turn those rejection letters into interviews?" Ethan's mouth went dry. "I'd ask what you wanted in return." Isabella laughed, a sound like ice cracking. "Smart boy, I like that." She circled him slowly, appraising. "Here's what I want. I'm giving a series of lectures at Columbia next month, the Ashford Chen Initiative for Innovation in Medicine. I need someone brilliant, multilingual, and capable of making me look good in front of donors, faculty, and potential investors." "You want me to be your, what, assistant?" "Partner," Isabella corrected. "Temporary, of course. 8 weeks. You'll help me prepare presentations, translate when needed, attend events, make small talk with boring people. In exchange, I'll write you a letter of recommendation that will open every door currently closed to you. I'll make phone calls. I'll leverage every contact I have." It sounded too good to be true, which meant it probably was. Ethan had learned that lesson early and learned it hard. "Why me?" he asked. "You could hire someone actually qualified, someone with experience." Isabella's expression shifted into something almost like respect. "Because you did something today that very few people do. You surprised me. You could have been humiliated up there. You could have fumbled, apologized, made excuses. Instead, you called my bluff. You showed me you're not just smart, you're strategic. That's rare." She extended her hand, and Ethan noticed her nails were painted a deep burgundy that matched her dress. "So, do we have a deal?" Ethan looked at her hand, then at her face, trying to read what lay behind those calculating eyes. Every instinct screamed that this was a trap, that people like Isabella Zhao Williams didn't hand out life-changing opportunities to waiters they'd just met. But he thought about his apartment, about his mother's disappointed voice when he'd told her about his latest rejection, about the dream that grew fainter with each passing day. "What happens if I say no?" Ethan asked. Isabella's smile was sharp as a knife. "Then you go back upstairs, serve my duck, and wonder for the rest of your life what might have been. I'm offering you a chance, Ethan. What you do with it is up to you." Have you ever had to choose between a safe path and a risky opportunity that could change everything? What helped you decide? Ethan took her hand. Her grip was surprisingly strong. 8 weeks, he said, and I want that letter of recommendation in writing signed before I start. 7 weeks, Isabella countered, and you'll get the letter when you've earned it. Prove you're worth my investment, Ethan Morrison. She released his hand and moved toward the door, then paused. Oh, and Ethan, quit this job tomorrow. You won't have time for it anymore, and honestly, you're better than this place. Better than serving people who can't see past your uniform. Then she was gone, leaving Ethan alone among bottles of wine that cost more than he made in a month, his heart racing, his mind spinning with possibilities and dangers in equal measure. He just made a deal with someone who tried to humiliate him less than an hour ago. Someone whose reputation included leaving a trail of damaged careers in her wake. Someone who looked at people like chess pieces to be moved and discarded. But she'd also seen him, really seen him, in a way that no one had in years. Ethan pulled out his phone and stared at the screen, his thumb hovering over his mother's contact. What would he even say? Mom, I just quit my job to work for a billionaire who might destroy my life or save it, not sure which yet. Instead, he typed a different message, to his sister Maya in Atlanta. I think I just did something either really brave or really stupid, possibly both. Her response came immediately, that's my brother, what happened? Ethan looked around the wine cellar, at the fortune in bottles surrounding him, and typed, I'll tell you when I figure out if I'm dreaming or having a nightmare. Maya, knowing you, probably both. Be careful, Ethan, and remember, you're smarter than you think you are. He pocketed his phone and headed back upstairs, where Isabella Zhao Williams's duck awaited plating, and his last shift at La Lumiere was already beginning to feel like a memory from someone else's life. Part 3. The Inciting Incident. Ethan's final shift at La Lumiere ended at 10:30 p.m., after the last lingering diners had finally paid their astronomical bills and wandered out into the Manhattan night. He'd expected to feel something, relief, anxiety, regret, but instead felt only a strange numbness as he hung up his apron for the last time. Pierre had taken the news of his resignation with barely concealed panic. You can't just leave. We're understaffed as it is, and Mrs. Ashford Chen specifically requested. Mrs. Ashford Chen specifically requested that I work for her directly, Ethan interrupted, and watched Pierre's face cycle through several emotions before settling on envious disbelief. You're working for her. Starting tomorrow. The word had spread through the staff within minutes. Some offered congratulations that felt genuine. Others looked at him with suspicion, as if he'd betrayed some unspoken code by escaping the service industry through what appeared to be a billionaire's whim. Thomas, the veteran waiter who'd served in the Foreign Legion, pulled him aside near the kitchen. Be careful with that one, he said in his thick French accent. I've seen her destroy people. She collects broken things, companies, careers, people, uses them until they're no longer interesting, then discards them. I can handle myself, Ethan said, with more confidence than he felt. That's what they all think. Thomas gripped his shoulder. Just remember, when you're dealing with people who have that much money and power, you're never an equal. You're always a transaction. Now, standing in his cramped studio apartment at nearly midnight, Ethan stared at the email that had arrived from Isabella's assistant 20 minutes after he'd left the restaurant. Mr. Reed, Mrs. Ashford Chen expects you at her office tomorrow at 8:00 a.m. sharp. Address below. Dress code, business professional. You'll be meeting with her team to discuss the lecture series and your role in the initiative. Do not be late. Regard, Jennifer Wu, Executive Assistant to Isabella Zhao Williams. Attached was a non-disclosure agreement, an independent contractor agreement, and a document outlining his compensation, $15,000 for 7 weeks of work, more money than Ethan made in 6 months at La Lumiere. He should have been celebrating. Instead, he lay awake until 3 a.m., his mind racing through scenarios that ranged from triumphant to catastrophic. What if this was all an elaborate setup? What if Isabella was the kind of wealthy person who entertained herself by dangling hope in front of desperate people, then snatching it away. But then he remembered the look in her eyes in the wine cellar, not cruel exactly, but calculating, interested, like she'd found a puzzle she wanted to solve. The Ashford Chen Foundation occupied the top 3 floors of a gleaming tower in Midtown, all glass and steel, and the kind of aggressive modernity that announced its importance to anyone within viewing distance. Ethan arrived at 7:45 a.m., his only suit, a navy blue number he'd bought for medical school interviews, pressed and perfect. The lobby receptionist barely glanced at him before directing him to the 47th floor. The elevator was faster than any Ethan had experienced, his ears popping as it rocketed upward. The doors opened onto what could only be described as controlled chaos. The entire floor was an open workspace where dozens of people moved with purposeful urgency. Phones rang. Conversations in multiple languages overlapped. Somewhere, someone was arguing about market projections for biotech startups. Ethan Morrison, a young Asian woman, mid-20s, impeccably dressed in a black pantsuit, materialized beside him. "This must be Jennifer Wu." "That's me," Ethan said. "Follow me. Mrs. Ashford Chen is in a meeting, but she wanted you to observe this morning's strategy session. You'll be briefed on the lecture series afterward." Jennifer moved through the office like a shark through water, and Ethan struggled to keep pace. Quick overview. The Ashford Chen Initiative focuses on bringing innovative medical technology to underserved communities. Mrs. Ashford Chen will be delivering lectures at Columbia, with potential expansion to Yale and Stanford depending on donor response. They entered a conference room where at least 15 people sat around a massive table. Ethan recognized the type immediately: consultants, strategists, the kind of people who got paid obscene amounts to tell other rich people how to spend their money. "Everyone, this is Ethan Morrison," Jennifer announced. "He'll be assisting Mrs. Ashford Chen with the lecture series. Ethan, take a seat." He found an empty chair near the end of the table, hyper-aware of the curious glances sent his way. A few people nodded politely. Others barely acknowledged his presence. Then Isabella entered, and the room's energy shifted instantly. She wore a crimson suit that probably cost more than Ethan's entire wardrobe, her platinum hair pulled back in a severe bun that emphasized her sharp cheekbones. She looked like power personified, like someone who'd never heard the word no and wouldn't recognize it if she had. "Good morning," she said, her voice cutting through the ambient conversation. "Let's begin." For the next 90 minutes, Ethan watched Isabella Zhao Williams operate at full capacity. She dissected marketing strategies, challenged financial projections, switched between English, Mandarin, and French mid-sentence depending on who she was addressing. She was brilliant and terrifying in equal measure, and Ethan found himself taking mental notes on everything from her body language to how she structured arguments. This was a masterclass in wielding power. "Ethan." His name cut through his observations. Isabella was looking directly at him. "I want your opinion on something," she continued. "We're debating whether to focus the first lecture on AI integration in diagnostic medicine or on mobile health clinics for rural communities. What would resonate more with Columbia's donor base?" Every eye in the room turned to him. This was another test, public this time with witnesses. Ethan took a breath. He could play it safe, give some generic answer that wouldn't offend anyone, or he could be honest. "Neither," he said. Isabella's eyebrow arched. "Explain." Columbia's donor base is already saturated with AI healthcare pitches. Every tech billionaire with a conscience and a checkbook is funding that space. And mobile health clinics, while important, lack the innovation factor that gets people excited enough to open their wallets. Ethan leaned forward. "But if you focus on something that bridges both, AI-powered diagnostic tools specifically designed for resource-poor settings, tools that can function without reliable internet or electricity, tools that address the actual barriers to healthcare access, that's novel. That's fundable. The silence that followed felt dangerous. Then Isabella smiled. Exactly what I thought. See, this is why I hired him. She turned to her team. Adjust the lecture focus accordingly. I want a full brief on existing technology in that space by end of day. The meeting continued, but Ethan felt the shift in how people looked at him. He wasn't just some random hire anymore. He was someone Isabella Zhao Williams listened to. When the meeting finally ended, Isabella gestured for Ethan to follow her to her private office. The space was enormous, with floor-to-ceiling windows, offering a view of Manhattan that made Ethan's breath catch. "You did well in there," Isabella said, pouring herself water from a crystal pitcher. "Better than I expected." Was that another test? Everything is a test, Ethan. The sooner you understand that, the better. She sat behind her desk, a massive piece of modern art in wood and steel. "Now, let's discuss what you're actually here for." Ethan waited, his instincts prickling. "The lecture series is real," Isabella continued. "But it's also, shall we say, multi-purpose. I'm using it to court investors for a much larger project, a healthcare venture that could revolutionize how we deliver medical services to underserved populations. Think of it as building an entirely new infrastructure. And you need me because the optics of a brilliant young black man, a pre-med student no less, working alongside me on this initiative is powerful, because you understand both worlds I'm trying to bridge, because you're hungry enough to do excellent work and smart enough to know when to keep your mouth shut." Isabella's gaze was steady, unflinching. "I'm using you, Ethan. I won't pretend otherwise. But I'm also giving you something you desperately need: access, connections, credibility." Her honesty was somehow more unsettling than if she'd lied. "What happens after 7 weeks?" Ethan asked. "That depends entirely on you. Exceed my expectations and I'll make good on my promises. Disappoint me and you'll go back to waiting tables, except now you'll have burned bridges and have a gap in your resume you can't explain." Isabella stood, moving to the window. "I don't do charity, Ethan. I invest in things and people that offer returns. Show me you're worth investing in." Ethan joined her at the window, looking out at the city sprawling below them. Somewhere down there was his apartment, his old life, the safety of obscurity. "I have one condition," he said. Isabella turned to him, surprised. "You're negotiating with me." "You said everything is a test, so here's mine. I want to be involved in the actual medical aspects of this project. Not just the presentations, not just the optics. If you're building something that's supposed to help people, I want to help build it." Ethan met her gaze. "Otherwise, I'm just a prop, and I didn't leave my job to be anyone's prop." For a long moment, Isabella said nothing. Then she extended her hand again, just as she had in the wine cellar. "Deal," she said. "But understand this, Ethan, once you're in, you're all in. This isn't a part-time commitment. This will consume your life for the next 7 weeks. No backing out, no second thoughts. Can you handle that?" Ethan thought about his father, about the ambulance that came too late, about every rejection letter he'd received, about the dream that had kept him going through 3 years of disappointment. "Yes," he said and shook her hand. Neither of them could have known that this handshake, this moment, would set in motion a chain of events that would tear apart everything they thought they knew about trust, ambition, and the price of success. Because at that exact moment, 3 floors below in the legal department, an attorney named Michael Park was reviewing documents that would reveal Isabella Zhao Williams's healthcare initiative wasn't what it appeared to be. And Ethan Morrison had just signed on to help her build it. Part 4: Rising Tension. The first week passed in a blur of 18-hour days and learning curves, so steep Ethan felt like he was climbing vertical walls. Isabella's team moved with the kind of synchronized efficiency that came from either extensive training or sheer terror, and Ethan suspected it was both. Jennifer Wu became his unlikely guide through the chaos, explaining the office politics and social hierarchies, with the detached amusement of someone who'd long since learned to navigate them. Mrs. Ashford Chen goes through assistance like most people go through coffee, Jennifer explained over lunch on Ethan's third day. They sat in a conference room overlooking the city, expensive salads neither of them was really eating spread before them. You're her. What? 15th special project in the past 2 years. That's comforting, Ethan said dryly. I'm not trying to scare you, just manage your expectations. Jennifer speared a cherry tomato with more force than necessary. She's brilliant, genuinely brilliant, but she's also ruthless. I was going to say complicated, but ruthless works too. Jennifer leaned back. Look, I've worked for her for 3 years. I've seen her fund entire hospitals in developing countries. I've also seen her destroy competitors so thoroughly they left the industry. She contains multitudes. That night, Ethan worked until past midnight, helping Isabella refine her first lecture. They sat in her office, the city lights glittering below them, arguing about medical terminology and presentation flow. You can't use synergistic healthcare ecosystem, Ethan said, highlighting the phrase in the draft. Nobody knows what that actually means. It's industry terminology, Isabella countered. It's meaningless jargon that makes you sound like every other tech entrepreneur trying to disrupt healthcare without understanding it. Ethan looked up from his laptop. You want to connect with your audience, talk like a human being. Isabella stared at him and Ethan braced for the explosion. Instead, she laughed, genuinely laughed, the first time he'd heard the sound from her. You're right, she admitted. This section is terrible, fix it. By the second week, they'd fallen into a rhythm. Isabella would arrive at 7 a.m. with ideas that ranged from brilliant to insane. Ethan would help her separate the two, refining concepts into something presentable. They argued constantly about data presentation, about target audiences, about the fundamental purpose of what they were building. You're thinking too small, Isabella insisted during one particularly heated debate. They were reviewing the technical specifications for the diagnostic devices her company planned to develop. These communities need solutions that work at scale. They need solutions that actually work, period, Ethan shot back. You can't scale something if it doesn't function in real-world conditions. Have you ever been to a rural clinic? Have you seen what healthcare looks like when you're operating with no electricity, no internet, no supplies? Have you? Isabella challenged. Yes, actually. I spent a summer doing volunteer medical work in rural Mississippi. I watched doctors perform miracles with duct tape and prayer because they didn't have access to the technology that hospitals in Manhattan take for granted. Something shifted in Isabella's expression. Tell me more about that. So Ethan did. He told her about Mrs. Johnson, who'd walked 6 miles with chest pain because she didn't trust the local clinic. About the diabetic teenager who'd gone into ketoacidosis because insulin was too expensive. About the doctor who'd cried in the staff room because she'd lost a patient she could have saved if she'd had the right equipment. Isabella listened with an intensity that made Ethan uncomfortable, as if she was cataloging every word for future use. This is good, she said finally. This is the kind of specificity we need. I want you to write this up, personal narratives, real cases. We'll incorporate them into the presentations. That feels exploitative, Ethan said carefully. Everything is exploitative if you think about it long enough. Isabella stood, packing her office. But it's also effective. People don't donate to statistics, Ethan. They donate to stories. We give them compelling stories, they give us funding, we build technology that actually helps people. Everyone wins. Except the people whose pain gets turned into fundraising material. Isabella turned to face him. You think I'm using them? I'm giving them a voice. I'm making their struggles visible to people who have the resources to change things. That's not exploitation, that's advocacy. It's both, Ethan said quietly. It can be both things at once. They stared at each other, the tension in the room shifting into something neither of them quite understood. For the first time, Ethan saw something in Isabella's eyes that looked almost like respect. "You're not what I expected," she said. "Neither are you." The moment stretched between them, charged with something Ethan couldn't name. Then Isabella's phone buzzed, shattering whatever had been building. "That's my reminder. I have dinner with investors." She gathered her things with practiced efficiency. "Tomorrow, we're visiting Columbia to scope out the venue for the first lecture. Be ready at 8 a.m. After she left, Ethan sat alone in her office, his heart racing for reasons he didn't want to examine too closely. Jennifer's warning echoed in his mind. She's complicated. That was starting to feel like a massive understatement. His phone rang, his mother, calling for their weekly check-in. "Hey, Mom," Ethan answered, injecting false cheer into his voice. "Ethan Morrison, don't you hey Mom me. I haven't heard from you in a week and a half. What's going on?" He told her about the job, carefully editing out the parts that would make her worry. His mother had a sixth sense for danger, and the last thing Ethan needed was her showing up at Isabella's office to assess the situation. "This woman," his mother said slowly, "the billionaire, what's she like?" "Driven, brilliant, a little scary if I'm honest." "Mom, and is she pretty?" "Mom, I'm just asking. You've been alone too long, baby. It wouldn't kill you to notice if someone is attractive." "She's my boss, Mom, and she's—" Ethan paused, unsure how to finish that sentence. "She's what? Untouchable, dangerous, increasingly occupying space in his thoughts that had nothing to do with work." "She's complicated," he finished lamely. His mother laughed, knowing. "Lord help you, Ethan. You've got it bad already." "I do not." "Deny it all you want. I know my son. Just be careful, you hear. Women with that much power, they play by different rules." After hanging up, Ethan checked his email and found a message from Michael Park. The attorney Jennifer had mentioned worked in the foundation's legal department. They'd been introduced briefly at a team meeting, but hadn't interacted much. "Mr. Reed, I need to speak with you urgently about the healthcare initiative. Not over email. Can we meet tomorrow morning before you go to Columbia? Coffee shop across the street, 7:15 a.m. This is important. Michael Park." Ethan stared at the message, unease creeping up his spine. The phrasing was careful, almost paranoid, not over email, as if Michael suspected monitoring. He should tell Isabella about this. She'd made clear that all communications about the project went through her. But something stopped him. Maybe curiosity, maybe instinct, maybe the memory of how Isabella's eyes had flickered when she'd talked about what the project could be rather than what it was. Ethan typed a response, "I'll be there." He sent it before he could second-guess himself, then immediately wondered if he'd just made a terrible mistake. The next morning, Ethan arrived at the coffee shop at 7:10 a.m. Michael was already there, hunched over a laptop in a back corner, looking like he hadn't slept in days. "Thanks for coming," Michael said without preamble as Ethan sat down. "I wasn't sure you would." "Your email was cryptic." "Necessarily so." Michael glanced around the coffee shop, checking for familiar faces. "How much do you know about the healthcare initiative's funding structure?" "Not much. That's not really my area. I'm focused on the presentations and public-facing elements." "Right, the optics." Michael's laugh was bitter. "Of course that's what she'd have you working on. Look, Ethan, I'm going to be direct because we don't have much time. I've been reviewing the financial documents for this project and something is very wrong." Ethan felt his stomach tighten. Define wrong. Michael opened his laptop, angling the screen so Ethan could see. It showed a complex web of financial transactions, money flowing between various accounts and shell companies. The Ashford Chen Initiative is structured as a non-profit, which means it's supposed to be transparent about funding sources and expenditures. but I've found at least $6 million that can't be accounted for. Money coming in from sources that don't match any of our registered donors. Money going out to companies that don't seem to exist beyond PO boxes and registered agents. Maybe there's a legitimate explanation. It's what I thought at first, so I started asking questions, quietly, carefully, and you know what happened? Michael's hands were shaking slightly. I got a visit from Isabella's personal attorney, not the foundation's attorney, hers. He told me very politely that I was overstepping my bounds, that some aspects of the project were compartmentalized for competitive reasons, that I should focus on the areas I was specifically assigned to and stop investigating things that were above my pay grade. Ethan tried to process this. So you're saying Isabella is, what, embezzling from her own foundation? I'm saying I don't know what's happening, but whatever it is, it's not what you think it is. This whole initiative, the lectures, the technology development, the public-facing mission, I think it might be a front for something else. That's a serious accusation. I know, and I'm probably committing career suicide by even telling you this. But you seem like a decent guy, Ethan. You seem like you actually care about the mission Isabella's selling. And I thought you deserved to know that you might be helping build something that's not what it appears to be. Ethan sat back, his mind racing. This couldn't be real. Isabella was intense, yes, and maybe morally complicated, but this level of deception. It didn't fit with the woman who'd listened so intently to his stories about rural clinics, who'd argued with him about the best way to actually help people. But then again, how well did he really know her? He'd worked for her for 2 weeks. She'd been charming, engaging, surprisingly open about using him for optics. Maybe that honesty had been calculated too, designed to make him trust her by appearing to reveal her manipulation. "What do you want me to do?" Ethan asked. "Keep your eyes open, pay attention to things that don't add up, and if you find anything that suggests I'm right, contact me immediately." Michael slid a burner phone across the table. "Use this. Don't call from your regular phone. Don't email. Isabella has access to all Foundation communications." Ethan stared at the phone like it was a live grenade. "I need to think about this," he said. "Think fast, because whatever Isabella is planning, it's moving forward quickly. The first lecture is in 3 weeks. Whatever she needs this initiative for, I suspect it comes to a head around then." Ethan pocketed the phone, feeling its weight like an anchor. "I should go. I'm supposed to meet her at 8. "Ethan?" Michael caught his arm as he stood. "Be careful. Isabella Zhao Williams is one of the most powerful people in this city. If she's involved in something illegal or unethical, she's not going to let anyone expose it, especially not someone she can discredit as easily as she can elevate." The words followed Ethan as he left the coffee shop and headed to Isabella's office. His phone buzzed with a text from her. "Running late. Meet me at Columbia instead. Admin building, room 402. Ethan changed direction, his thoughts churning. He could confront Isabella directly, demand answers about what Michael had told him. But if Michael was wrong, he'd destroy the fragile trust he'd built with her. And if Michael was right, then Ethan had just become complicit in something that could destroy everything he'd worked for. He arrived at Columbia 20 minutes later, the campus bringing back a flood of memories from his undergraduate years. How simple things had seemed then: study hard, get good grades, get into medical school, save lives. The path had appeared so clear. Isabella waited for him outside the administration building, and Ethan's breath caught despite himself. She wore a navy suit that made her look simultaneously powerful and vulnerable, her hair loose around her shoulders instead of pulled back in its usual severe style. "There you are," she said, smiling, "ready to see where we'll change the world." The easy confidence in her voice, the genuine warmth in her expression, it didn't match Michael's accusations. It didn't fit with the image of someone orchestrating elaborate financial fraud. But Ethan had learned that people were capable of containing contradictions, of being multiple things at once. "Ready," he said, and followed her inside, the burner phone heavy in his pocket. When someone you're starting to trust shows you one face, but others warn you about what's hidden beneath, how do you know who to believe? Neither of them noticed the woman watching from across the quad, camera in hand, documenting their arrival with professional precision. She'd been hired to track Isabella Zhao Williams's movements, and Ethan Morrison had just become a person of interest in an investigation that was about to turn both their lives inside out. Part 5: The Revelation. The lecture hall at Columbia was smaller than Ethan remembered, though perhaps that was because Isabella Zhao Williams's presence seemed to fill any space she occupied. They walked through the empty auditorium, Isabella pointing out where the presentation screen would go, where she'd stand, how the lighting should be adjusted for maximum impact. "We'll need the first 3 rows reserved for major donors," she said, her heels clicking against the floor as she paced the stage. "The dean will introduce me, but keep it brief, no more than 2 minutes. People came to hear me, not him." Ethan made notes on his tablet, hyper-aware of the burner phone in his jacket pocket. Every word Isabella spoke felt weighted now, loaded with potential double meanings. Was she really planning how to deliver an inspiring lecture, or was this all theater designed to distract from whatever Michael had uncovered? "You're quiet today," Isabella observed, stopping mid-stride to look at him. "Something wrong?" Everything Ethan wanted to say. Instead, he forced a smile. "Just taking it all in. This is where it all starts." "Where what starts?" "The initiative, the change you're trying to create." He met her gaze, searching for any flicker of deception. "This is real, right? What we're building?" Isabella's expression softened in a way Ethan had never seen before. She walked to the edge of the stage and sat down, gesturing for him to join her. Up close, he could see the faint lines around her eyes, evidence of late nights and early mornings, of carrying weight that never got set down. "When I was 23, Isabella began, my younger brother got sick. Rare autoimmune disorder that the doctors in our rural Chinese town had never seen before. By the time we got him to a hospital with proper diagnostic equipment, it was too late. He died 3 weeks after his 15th birthday. Ethan felt his chest tighten. This wasn't what he'd expected. "I started my first tech company with money I borrowed from every relative who'd take my call," Isabella continued. "Made my first million by 28, my first billion by 35. And you know what I realized? Money can buy almost anything except time. I can't bring my brother back, but I can make sure other people don't lose their siblings, their parents, their children, because they couldn't access basic medical technology." She turned to face him fully, and Ethan saw something raw in her expression, something that looked like genuine pain. "So yes, Ethan, this is real. Maybe the realest thing I've ever done. Everything else, the venture capital, the tech investments, the empire building, that was about proving I could. This is about proving it mattered." Ethan wanted to believe her. God, he wanted to believe her so badly it physically hurt. But Michael's warning echoed in his mind. People don't donate to statistics. They donate to stories. Was this just another story, perfectly crafted to manipulate him? "Why did you really hire me?" Ethan asked quietly. "The truth this time." Isabella was silent for a long moment. "Because when you spoke Mandarin to me in that restaurant, when you refused to let me humiliate you, you reminded me of my brother. He had that same fire, that same refusal to be diminished by people who thought they were better than him." She stood abruptly, as if embarrassed by the admission. "And yes, because having you involved improves the optics. I told you I don't do charity. Both things can be true." Before Ethan could respond, Isabella's phone rang. She answered it, her expression shifting from vulnerable to all business in an instant. "What do you mean the SEC is asking questions?" She walked away, her voice dropping to an urgent whisper that Ethan couldn't quite make out. "The SEC, Securities and Exchange Commission, the federal agency that investigated financial fraud. Ethan's blood ran cold. He pulled out his own phone and pretended to check emails while straining to hear Isabella's conversation. Fragments reached him, completely routine, no reason to panic, handle it through the usual channels. When she hung up, her face was pale beneath her carefully applied makeup. "I need to cut this short," Isabella said, her voice clipped. "Something's come up at the office. Can you handle the logistics meeting with the Columbia events coordinator without me?" "Of course, but—" "Good, Jennifer will send you the details. I'll see you tomorrow." Isabella was already moving toward the exit, her movements quick and tense. "Isabella," Ethan called after her, "is everything okay?" She paused in the doorway, backlit by the hallway lights. "Everything's fine, Ethan. Just routine business complications. Nothing for you to worry about." Then she was gone, and Ethan was alone in the empty auditorium with 1,000 questions and no good answers. He pulled out the burner phone and texted Michael, "Need to talk. SEC is involved." The response came immediately, "Coffee shop, 6 p.m., come alone." The rest of the day passed in a haze. Ethan went through the motions, met with the events coordinator, finalized seating arrangements, reviewed catering options. But his mind was elsewhere. He kept checking the news for any mention of Isabella or the Ashford Chen Foundation. Nothing yet, but that didn't mean anything. At 5:45 p.m., Ethan left the office and took a circuitous route to the coffee shop, doubling back twice to make sure he wasn't followed. He felt ridiculous doing it, like a character in a bad spy movie, but Michael's paranoia was apparently contagious. Michael was already there, looking even worse than he had that morning. His tie was loosened, his eyes were bloodshot, and he had the manic energy of someone running on caffeine and fear. "The SEC contacted the Foundation's legal department this afternoon," Michael said without preamble. "They're investigating suspicious financial activity related to the healthcare initiative. Someone filed a whistleblower complaint." "Was it you?" "No, I don't know who, but someone inside the organization knows something and went to the authorities." Michael pulled out his laptop, fingers flying across the keyboard. "I've been digging deeper since this morning. Ethan, this goes way beyond what I initially thought." He turned the screen toward Ethan. It showed a network diagram, connections between the Ashford Chen Foundation and dozens of other entities, pharmaceutical companies, medical device manufacturers, offshore investment firms. "What am I looking at?" "A money laundering operation disguised as a charitable initiative," Michael said grimly. "Isabella has been using the foundation to move money between her various business interests, avoiding taxes and hiding the true ownership of several companies. The healthcare initiative. It's a front. A very expensive, very public front designed to make her look like a philanthropist while she games the system." Ethan felt like the floor had dropped out from under him. "That can't be right. I've been working on the actual technology specifications. The diagnostic devices are real. The implementation plans are detailed and thorough." "Oh, I'm sure they are. That's what makes it such a perfect cover. Isabella's probably planning to develop some version of this technology, just not the revolutionary, accessible, world-changing version she's promising donors and the public. She'll create something minimal, claim budgetary constraints, and pocket the difference. Classic bait and switch." "You don't know that for certain." "Ethan," Michael's voice was gentle but firm, "I know you want to believe in this. I know you want to believe in her. But the evidence doesn't lie. The money trails don't lie. And the fact that the SEC is now involved means I'm not the only one who sees it." Ethan stood, needing to move, to think, to do anything but sit there, and accept that everything he'd been working toward was built on lies. "What do you want from me?" he asked. "Help me prove it. You have access to Isabella's office, her files, her private conversations. You could find documentation that connects all the pieces. evidence that would be admissible in a federal investigation. You want me to spy on her? I want you to help expose the truth. There's a difference. Was there? Ethan wasn't sure anymore. He thought about Isabella's story about her brother, the pain in her eyes when she'd talked about losing him. Had that been real? Or just another manipulation, another story deployed at exactly the right moment to secure his loyalty? I need time to think, Ethan said. We don't have time. The SEC investigation will move quickly now. If Isabella figures out there's a whistleblower inside the organization, she'll start destroying evidence and cutting loose anyone who might become a liability. That includes you, Ethan. The words hit like a physical blow. Of course it did. Ethan was the outsider, the newcomer with no connections or power. He was exactly the kind of person who could be sacrificed to protect the larger operation. I'll think about it, Ethan repeated, and left before Michael could argue further. He walked for hours, barely noticing where he was going. His phone buzzed constantly, texts from Jennifer asking about tomorrow's schedule, an email from his mother checking in, a reminder about his sister's birthday next week. Normal life, continuing as if Ethan's entire world wasn't crumbling. Finally, near midnight, he found himself outside Isabella's building. The lights in her office were still on, visible from the street. Of course she was still working. When did she ever stop? Ethan made a decision that was either incredibly brave or phenomenally stupid. He went inside. The night security guard barely glanced at his ID before waving him through. The elevator ride to the 47th floor felt interminable. When the doors opened, he found the office mostly empty except for a few dedicated souls still at their computers. Isabella's door was closed, but he could see her silhouette through the frosted glass. He knocked. Come in. She sat at her desk, surrounded by legal documents and financial reports. Her hair had fallen out of its careful styling, and her makeup had worn off, revealing dark circles under her eyes. She looked exhausted and human and heartbreakingly vulnerable. Ethan, she said, surprise flickering across her face, what are you doing here? I need you to tell me the truth, he said, closing the door behind him. About the SEC investigation, about the foundation's finances, about what we're really building. Isabella's expression shuddered immediately, walls slamming into place. I don't know what you're talking about. Please don't do that. Don't treat me like I'm stupid. I know the SEC is investigating. I know there are questions about the foundation's money. I need to know if everything you told me today, about your brother, about changing the world, about why this matters, if any of it was real. For a long moment, Isabella just looked at him. Then, slowly, she stood and walked to the windows overlooking the city. My brother was real, she said quietly. His death was real. The pain of watching him die while knowing that better medical care could have saved him, that was all real. But the world isn't changed through noble intentions alone, Ethan. It requires power. It requires money. It requires being willing to play the game by the rules that exist, not the rules you wish existed. Isabella turned to face him. Yes, the foundation's financial structure is complex. Yes, there are aspects that might look questionable to outsiders who don't understand the bigger picture. But everything I'm doing is legal, and it's all in service of building something that will actually make a difference. The SEC doesn't investigate legal activities. The SEC investigates anything that gets reported to them by disgruntled employees or competitors trying to undermine my work. It's a fishing expedition, nothing more. Ethan wanted to believe her. The conviction in her voice, the fire in her eyes, it felt genuine. But he'd learned that feeling genuine and being genuine weren't the same thing. I met with Michael Park, Ethan said, and watched Isabella's expression freeze. He showed me evidence of money laundering, shell companies, offshore accounts. He says the entire healthcare initiative is a front. The silence that followed was deadly. Michael Park, Isabella said slowly, is a junior attorney with delusions of grandeur who's been passed over for promotion twice. He's looking for a way to make himself important, and apparently he's decided that making wild accusations is his path to relevance. So you're saying he's lying? I'm saying he's connecting dots that don't form the picture he thinks they do. Yes, the foundation uses complex financial structures. That's because we operate internationally, work with partners in countries with different tax laws and regulatory frameworks. Everything Michael is reading as sinister is actually just sophisticated financial planning. Then show me. Explain it to me. Help me understand why it looks so damning if it's all legitimate. Isabella laughed, but there was no humor in it. Why? So you can run back to Michael with ammunition for his conspiracy theories. So you can decide whether I'm worthy of your trust. She moved closer, her voice dropping. Here's what I'll tell you instead. You have a choice to make, Ethan. You can believe in the work we're doing, the real, tangible good we're building, or you can believe a paranoid attorney who's never created anything of value in his life. But you can't do both. That's not fair. Nothing is fair. That's the first lesson you should have learned by now. Isabella's eyes blazed. You think those medical schools rejected you because you weren't good enough, because your credentials weren't impressive. You were rejected because the system is designed to keep people like you out. It's rigged, Ethan. It always has been. The only way to win is to stop playing by their rules. So your solution is to become just as corrupt as they are. The words hung between them, sharp and accusatory. Isabella's face went very still. Get out of my office. Isabella. I said get out. You're fired, Ethan, effective immediately. Jennifer will process your final payment and arrange for your belongings to be sent to you. Don't come back to this building. Don't contact me or anyone on my team. We're done. Ethan felt like he'd been punched in the stomach. You can't just. I can do whatever I want. That's what having power means. You should try acquiring some instead of clinging to your moral superiority. Isabella turned her back on him, facing the windows again. Goodbye, Ethan. I hope your principles keep you warm when you're back to waiting tables. Ethan stood there for a moment, waiting for her to turn around to take it back, to admit this was just another test. But she remained motionless, her reflection in the window showing nothing but cold dismissal. He left. The elevator ride down felt like falling. The walk to the subway was a blur. Ethan made it to his apartment, closed the door, and finally let himself feel the full weight of what had just happened. He'd lost the job, lost the opportunity, lost any chance at the connections and credibility Isabella had promised. And for what? Because he'd asked questions, because he dared to demand truth from someone who dealt in calculated half-truths and strategic revelations. His phone rang. Michael Park. I heard what happened, Michael said when Ethan answered. Jennifer called me, said Isabella fired you. News travels fast. Ethan, I'm sorry. I know this isn't what you wanted. What I wanted was to believe that something good could come from all of this. That for once, the system could work in favor of people who actually need help instead of people who already have everything. Ethan laughed bitterly. Guess I'm the delusional one. No, you're idealistic, which is different. And right now, that idealism could help bring down someone who's using charity as a shield for fraud. Michael paused. I've been authorized to offer you immunity in exchange for cooperation with the SEC investigation. Any evidence you can provide about Isabella's financial activities, any documentation you accessed while working for her, it could be crucial to building a case. You want me to testify against her. I want you to do the right thing. Ethan thought about Isabella's story about her brother, about the raw pain in her voice when she described watching him die, about the fire in her eyes when she talked about changing broken systems. He thought about Michael's evidence, the money trails that didn't add up, the SEC investigation that suggested smoke and fire. He thought about his father, who died because help came too late, About every patient he'd met during that summer in Mississippi, suffering because the system had failed them. "If I do this," Ethan said slowly, "I need guarantees, real ones, in writing, immunity for anything I might have unknowingly been part of, protection from retaliation, and Isabella gets the chance to explain herself before anything goes public. That's not how these things usually work. That's how this one works, or you can find another whistleblower." Ethan's voice was firm. "I'm not going to destroy someone's life based on financial documents I don't fully understand. If Isabella is guilty, let her be proven guilty. But I won't be the weapon someone uses to take her down without due process." Michael was quiet for a long moment. "I'll see what I can arrange. But Ethan, be careful. Isabella Zhao Williams doesn't forgive betrayal. If she finds out you're cooperating with the investigation, she'll come after you with everything she has." After hanging up, Ethan sat in the darkness of his apartment, trying to understand how everything had fallen apart so quickly. 3 weeks ago, he'd been a waiter with a dream. Now he was unemployed, caught in the middle of a federal investigation, and facing the possibility of going up against one of the most powerful women in New York. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "We need to talk. Meet me where we first met. Tomorrow 2 p.m. Come alone. V." Ethan stared at the message, his heart pounding. Isabella wanted to see him. After firing him, after everything that had been said, she wanted to meet. It was probably a trap, definitely a bad idea. Could end with him being threatened, blackmailed, or worse. He texted back, "I'll be there." Because despite everything, the doubts, the accusations, the evidence that suggested she was exactly what Michael said she was, Ethan still needed to hear Isabella's side of the story. Still needed to look her in the eyes and know, with certainty, whether the woman he'd started to care about was a fraud or just someone trying to navigate an impossible situation. Have you ever had to choose between loyalty to someone you care about and doing what you believe is right? How did you know which path to take? Tomorrow would bring answers. Ethan just hoped he was ready for them. Part 6, Darkest Hour. La Lumiere looked different in the harsh afternoon light. The elegance that had seemed so effortless by evening appeared calculated by day, every chandelier positioned for maximum effect, every tablecloth pressed to aggressive perfection. Ethan stood outside for a full minute before entering, remembering the person he'd been the last time he walked through these doors. That Ethan had been invisible, forgettable, just another waiter in just another expensive restaurant. Now, 3 weeks later, he was someone else entirely, though whether that transformation was an elevation or a fall remained to be seen. Isabella sat at a corner table, the same one where she'd first tested him with Mandarin. She wore black today, simple and severe, her hair pulled back so tightly it looked painful. When she saw Ethan approach, her expression revealed nothing. "Sit," she said, not an invitation, a command. Ethan sat. For a long moment, they just looked at each other. The restaurant was nearly empty between lunch and dinner service, giving them a privacy that felt both fortunate and ominous. "You're probably wearing a wire," Isabella said finally. "Or at least you should be if Michael Park has any sense. Are you?" The directness caught Ethan off guard. "No." "Prove it." Ethan stood and removed his jacket, then his shirt, showing he had nothing hidden. The few staff members present quickly looked away, embarrassed. Isabella watched him with clinical detachment, the way a scientist might observe a specimen. "Satisfied?" Ethan asked, pulling his shirt back on. "Not remotely, but at least I know this conversation is private." Isabella leaned back in her chair. "I'm going to tell you a story, Ethan, and when I'm done, you're going to make a choice that will determine both our futures." Ethan said nothing, waiting. "My brother's name was Wei," Isabella began. "He was brilliant, smarter than me, kinder than me, better than me in every way that mattered. When he got sick, my parents sold everything to get him to better doctors. Our house, our car, my mother's jewelry that had been in her family for 3 generations. It still wasn't enough. Her voice remained steady, but Ethan saw her hands tighten around the napkin in her lap. After Wei died, I made a promise. I would become powerful enough that money would never be an obstacle again. Not for me, not for my family, not for anyone I chose to help. And I've kept that promise, Ethan. Every company I've built, every deal I've made, every calculated risk I've taken, it's all been in service of having the resources to actually change things. By breaking the law, Ethan asked quietly. Isabella's laugh was sharp as broken glass. The law? Do you want to know what the law said when my brother was dying? It said that experimental treatments weren't approved for use in China. It said that the insurance we'd bought wasn't valid because Wei's condition was pre-existing. It said that importing medication from other countries was illegal, even if it could save his life. The law killed my brother, Ethan. So forgive me if I don't worship at its altar. That doesn't justify financial fraud. I haven't committed fraud, Isabella interrupted, her voice ice cold now. I've used complex but entirely legal financial structures to maximize the resources available for my work. Do I use offshore accounts? Yes, because international regulations require it for certain types of charitable work. Do I have shell companies? Yes, because that's how you protect intellectual property and maintain operational security. Every single thing Michael Park flagged as suspicious has a legitimate explanation. Then why won't you just explain it to the SEC? Because I shouldn't have to. Isabella's composure cracked slightly. Because the moment a successful woman, especially a Chinese woman, builds something powerful, people assume she must have cheated. They can't conceive that I might just be smarter, more strategic, more willing to work harder than anyone else. So they investigate, they probe, they demand I justify every decision as if I'm not entitled to the same privacy and respect afforded to men who have built empires on far shakier ground. Ethan wanted to argue, but he'd seen enough of the world to know she wasn't entirely wrong. The scrutiny successful women faced, the way their competence was always questioned, the assumption that they must have slept their way to the top or cut corners or somehow cheated the system. It was real and pervasive and corrosive. What do you want from me? Ethan asked. I want you to understand what's at stake. The SEC investigation will tie up the Foundation's resources for months, maybe years. During that time, the healthcare initiative will die. Not because it's a fraud, but because regulatory scrutiny makes donors nervous. They'll pull funding, partners will back out, and all the real work we could have done, the actual lives we could have saved, will evaporate. Isabella leaned forward, her eyes burning with intensity. But if you refuse to cooperate with Michael and the SEC, if you tell them you saw nothing suspicious during your time working with me, the investigation loses steam. It becomes just another nuisance inquiry that eventually gets dropped. The initiative continues. The technology gets developed. People who would have died from treatable conditions get the care they need. You're asking me to lie to federal investigators. I'm asking you to refuse to participate in a witch hunt based on the paranoid speculation of a disgruntled employee. Isabella reached across the table, her hand stopping just short of touching his. Ethan, I know you don't trust me completely. I know you have doubts. But search your heart and ask yourself, during the time we worked together, did you ever see evidence of actual wrongdoing? Or did you just see things that could be interpreted suspiciously by someone determined to see the worst? Ethan thought back over the past 3 weeks, the long nights refining presentations, the passionate arguments about how to actually help underserved communities, Isabella's genuine emotion when she talked about her brother, about changing systems that failed people. Had he seen evidence of fraud, or had he just seen complexity that Michael Park had painted in sinister colors? I don't know, Ethan admitted. That's the truth. I don't know what's real anymore. Then let me tell you what's real, Isabella said, and now she did take his hand, her grip surprisingly gentle. What's real is that you and I understand something most people never will. We know what it's like to lose someone because the system failed them. We know what it's like to be underestimated, to have doors slammed in our faces, to be told we don't belong in spaces we've more than earned the right to occupy. Her thumb traced small circles on the back of his hand, and Ethan felt his breath catch. We could do extraordinary things together, Ethan. Not just the healthcare initiative. That's just the beginning. I could fund your medical education, get you into any school you want, give you resources to research and develop whatever you're passionate about. You could save thousands of lives, tens of thousands. Or you can throw it all away to help Michael Park build a case against someone who's only trying to do good in a world that punishes ambitious women. Ethan pulled his hand away, needing distance to think clearly. This isn't about gender, Isabella. This is about right and wrong. Right and wrong. Isabella's expression hardened. How beautifully simple your world must be. Let me tell you about right and wrong in the real world. It's right that children in rural Mississippi don't die from preventable diseases. But it's wrong that the only way to fund solutions requires navigating a Byzantine regulatory system designed to benefit established players and exclude disruptive innovations. It's right that I should be able to move money freely between my charitable and business interests when they serve overlapping goals. But it's wrong that doing so requires structures that look suspicious to people who don't understand international finance. She stood, and Ethan saw how tired she looked. Not just physically, but soul-deep exhaustion that came from fighting endless battles. I'm not a villain, Ethan. I'm just someone who refuses to let perfect be the enemy of good, who understands that changing broken systems sometimes requires working around them. You can either help me do that, or you can side with people who have never built anything, never risked anything, never tried to make a real difference in the world. That's not fair. Stop talking about fair. Isabella's voice rose, echoing in the empty restaurant. Nothing about this situation is fair. It's not fair that my brother died. It's not fair that you've been rejected from medical schools despite being brilliant. It's not fair that people like Michael Park can destroy years of work with baseless accusations. But fairness is a fairy tale we tell children. Adults understand that the only thing that matters is power, and whether you use it to help or to hurt. She grabbed her purse, preparing to leave. You have 24 hours to decide, Ethan. Either tell the SEC you have nothing to contribute to their investigation, or become the person who destroyed the best chance at healthcare reform this country has seen in decades. Choose wisely. Isabella walked toward the exit, then paused and turned back. One more thing, that letter of recommendation I promised. I wrote it 3 days ago. It's sitting in my office, signed and sealed, addressed to the Dean of Admissions at Mount Sinai. You want to know what it says? She pulled out her phone, scrolled for a moment, then read aloud. Ethan Morrison is the most capable and morally courageous young person I've encountered in my 30 years in business and philanthropy. His commitment to serving underserved populations is matched only by his intellectual brilliance and his integrity. Any medical school would be fortunate to have him, and any patient would be blessed to have him as their physician. I give him my highest possible recommendation without reservation or qualification. Isabella looked up from her phone. That letter gets sent tomorrow if you do the right thing, or it gets shredded if you choose betrayal. Your future, Ethan, your choice. Then she was gone, leaving Ethan alone in the restaurant where this had all begun. He sat there for a long time, his mind spinning. A waiter he didn't recognize, his replacement, probably, approached hesitantly. "Sir, can I get you anything?" "No," Ethan said, "I'm just leaving." But he didn't leave, not yet. He pulled out his phone and called his sister Maya. "Hey, big brother," she answered, her voice warm and familiar and everything Ethan needed right now. "What's going on?" Ethan told her everything. The job with Isabella, Michael's accusations, the SEC investigation, the impossible choice he now faced. Maya listened without interrupting, the way she always did, giving him space to work through it out loud. When he finished, there was a long silence. "Do you love her?" Maya asked finally. The question caught Ethan completely off guard. "What? No, that's not this isn't about." "Ethan, I've known you your whole life. I can hear it in your voice when you talk about her. You might not be ready to admit it, but you've fallen for this woman. So the question isn't really about right and wrong, is it? It's about whether you can live with yourself if you destroy someone you care about." Ethan felt something crack open in his chest. She might be a criminal, Maya. She might be, or she might be what she says she is, someone trying to do good in a complicated world. But you won't know unless you trust your gut. What does it tell you? Ethan closed his eyes, searching for certainty and finding only confusion. "I don't know." "Then maybe you need to stop trying to figure out if Isabella is innocent or guilty and start asking yourself what kind of person you want to be. Because that's the only thing you can actually control here." After hanging up, Ethan walked the streets of Manhattan for hours, Maya's words echoing in his mind. What kind of person did he want to be? He'd always thought he knew the answer. The kind who helped people, who made a difference, who used whatever gifts he had in service of something larger than himself. But he'd also believed in following rules, in trusting systems, in doing things the right way. And where had that gotten him? 3 years of rejection letters, a dead-end job, dreams that felt further away with each passing day. Isabella was offering him a shortcut, a way to bypass all the obstacles and gatekeepers and get to the work that actually mattered. Was it wrong to take it, or was it naive to refuse? His phone buzzed with a text from Michael. "Have you made a decision? SEC wants to interview you tomorrow at 10 a.m. Before he could second-guess himself, Ethan called Michael. "I'll do it," he said when Michael answered. "I'll talk to the SEC, but on one condition. I want Isabella there. I want her to hear everything I say and have the chance to respond. If this is going to ruin her life, she deserves to face her accuser." "That's highly irregular," Michael said slowly. "Usually these interviews are conducted separately." "That's my condition. Take it or leave it." Michael sighed. "I'll see what I can do, but Ethan, are you sure about this? Once you start cooperating with a federal investigation, there's no going back. If Isabella is as vindictive as I think she is, she'll destroy you for this." "Let her try," Ethan said, with a confidence he didn't entirely feel. "I'm done being afraid of powerful people." After hanging up, Ethan sat on a bench overlooking the Hudson River, watching the sun set over New Jersey. The water reflected the dying light, turning everything gold and crimson, beautiful and fleeting. His phone rang. Isabella. For a long moment, Ethan just stared at her name on the screen. Then he answered. "I'm sorry," he said before she could speak, "but I have to do this. I have to tell the truth about what I saw, what I know, what I don't know, even if it means losing everything you offered me." The silence on the other end was deafening. "I see," Isabella said finally, her voice completely devoid of emotion. "Then I suppose we have nothing more to say to each other." "Isabella, wait." But she'd already hung up. Ethan sat there as night fell, feeling the full weight of what he'd just set in motion. He'd chosen his path. Now he had to walk it, even if it led him straight into darkness. His phone buzzed one last time, a text from Isabella. "You could have been extraordinary, Ethan. What a waste." And attached to the message was a video file. Ethan's hand shook as he pressed play. The video showed him in Isabella's office late one night, accessing files on her computer while she was in a meeting. He remembered that night. She'd asked him to pull up a document she needed. Completely innocent. But edited carefully, with certain moments highlighted and others removed, it looked like he was stealing proprietary information. Like he was the criminal. The message was clear. Isabella had insurance. If he testified against her, she'd use this footage to destroy his credibility and possibly charge him with corporate espionage. Ethan felt sick. He called Maya back. "She's going to destroy me," he said when she answered. "I chose to do the right thing, and now she's going to make sure I pay for it." "So you fight back," Maya said simply. "You tell the truth, you trust that justice exists, and you fight with everything you have. That's what Dad would have done. Their father, who died waiting for an ambulance, who'd believed in systems and rules and doing things right up until the moment those systems failed him." Ethan looked at the video again, at his own face frozen on the screen, in a moment that could be interpreted so many different ways depending on who controlled the narrative. Isabella controlled the narrative. She always had. Unless Ethan found a way to take control of his own story. He pulled out the burner phone Michael had given him and dialed. "I need you to do something for me," Ethan said when Michael answered. "Something that might be illegal and will definitely be dangerous. But if we're going to take down Isabella Zhao Williams, we need to be as strategic as she is." "I'm listening," Michael said. And Ethan began to outline a plan that would either save his life or end it completely. Part 7, The Turning Point Moment. The SEC offices in Lower Manhattan were aggressively bureaucratic, fluorescent lights that hummed with existential despair, beige walls that had given up on ever being anything else, and the peculiar smell of old coffee and older anxieties. Ethan sat in a conference room that looked exactly like every other conference room he'd ever been in, except this one might determine whether he had a future worth living. Michael Park sat beside him, looking nervous despite his attempt at professional composure. Across the table were two SEC investigators, Agent Sarah Morrison, a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and a sharper suit, and Agent James Park, younger, Korean-American, taking notes on a tablet with methodical precision. And at the end of the table, as Ethan had demanded, sat Isabella Zhao Williams with her attorney, a man named Richard Castellano, who probably charged more per hour than Ethan made in a month. Isabella hadn't looked at Ethan once since entering the room. She sat with perfect posture, her expression carved from ice, radiating controlled fury. "Mr. Reed," Agent Morrison began, her voice professionally neutral, "thank you for agreeing to speak with us. As you know, we're investigating potential financial irregularities at the Ashford Chen Foundation. We understand you worked closely with Mrs. Ashford Chen on the healthcare initiative. Is that correct?" "Yes," Ethan said. His voice sounded steadier than he felt. "And during that time, did you observe any activities that seemed unusual or potentially illegal?" This was it, the moment where Ethan either confirmed Michael's suspicions or defended Isabella, the moment where he chose what kind of person he was going to be. "I need to clarify something first," Ethan said. "I'm not a financial expert. I'm a pre-med student who was hired to help with presentations and public-facing elements of the initiative. So when I describe what I saw, I want to be clear that I'm not making judgments about legality, just reporting observations." Agent Morrison nodded. "Understood, please proceed." Ethan took a breath. "During my time working with Mrs. Ashford Chen, I saw a woman who was passionate about healthcare reform, who worked 18-hour days developing technology that could actually help underserved communities, who shared personal stories about losing her brother to inadequate medical care and seemed genuinely motivated by preventing others from experiencing that same loss." Isabella's eyes flickered toward him, surprise crossing her face. "I also saw," Ethan continued, "financial structures that I didn't understand, money moving between accounts in ways that seemed complicated but which Mrs. Ashford Chen and her team explained as necessary for international charitable work. Were those explanations true? I don't know. I'm not qualified to assess that. Did you ever witness Mrs. Ashford Chen explicitly directing funds to be used for purposes other than stated charitable objectives?" Agent Park asked. "No," Ethan said honestly. "Every conversation I heard, every document I saw, every meeting I attended, They were all focused on developing medical technology and implementing healthcare solutions. Richard Castellano, Isabella's attorney, made a note with evident satisfaction. But, Ethan added, and the room tensed, I also can't tell you that everything I saw was legitimate, because I wasn't given access to the full financial picture. I was deliberately kept in a specific lane, handling specific tasks, while other aspects of the operation remained opaque. Did you ever feel that this compartmentalization was intentional? Agent Morrison asked. That perhaps Mrs. Ashford Chen was hiding certain activities from you? Ethan looked at Isabella finally. She met his gaze, her expression unreadable. I think Mrs. Ashford Chen is one of the most strategic people I've ever met, Ethan said carefully. She doesn't do anything by accident. If I was kept away from certain information, it was intentional. Whether that was to protect proprietary business information or to hide illegal activity, I genuinely cannot say. Mr. Reed, Richard Castellano interjected smoothly, are you aware that making vague insinuations without factual basis could be construed as defamation? I'm aware, Ethan said. I'm also aware that failing to share relevant observations with federal investigators could be construed as obstruction, so I'm trying to walk a very fine line between honesty and speculation. How noble, Isabella said, speaking for the first time. Her voice dripped with acid. Tell me, Ethan, is this the same honesty that had you accessing my private files without authorization? She nodded to her attorney, who pulled out a tablet and played the video Ethan had seen the night before. The investigators watched as on screen Ethan appeared to be going through Isabella's computer files. As you can see, Castellano said, Mr. Reed may not be the most reliable witness regarding my client's business practices, given that he was apparently conducting corporate espionage during his employment. Agent Morrison looked at Ethan. Care to explain this? Ethan had known this was coming. He and Michael had spent hours last night preparing for it. Mrs. Ashford Chen asked me to retrieve a document from her computer while she was in a meeting, Ethan said. She gave me her password and specific instructions on where to find the file. What you're seeing is me following her direct orders, not engaging in espionage. Can you prove she authorized this access? Agent Park asked. I have text messages from her assistant confirming the request, Ethan said, pulling out his phone. And I imagine if you check Mrs. Ashford Chen's calendar, you'll see she was in a meeting with Japanese investors at the exact time this video was recorded. Michael handed over printouts of the relevant messages and calendar entries. Castellano's confident expression faltered slightly. Even so, the attorney pressed, the fact remains that Mr. Reed was fired from his position, suggesting Mrs. Ashford Chen had concerns about his performance or trustworthiness. I was fired, Ethan interrupted, because I asked questions about the foundation's finances, because I refused to blindly accept explanations that didn't make sense. Mrs. Ashford Chen presented it as me being unreliable. I'd argue it was because I was becoming too reliable, too willing to look beneath the surface. Isabella's facade cracked slightly. You self-righteous. Mrs. Ashford Chen, Agent Morrison cut in sharply, I'd advise you to let your attorney speak for you. An uncomfortable silence filled the room. Agent Park leaned forward. Mr. Reed, I'm going to ask you a direct question. Based on everything you observed during your employment, do you believe Mrs. Ashford Chen was using the foundation for illegal purposes? Ethan felt every eye on him. This was the moment, the choice that would determine everything. He thought about Isabella's story about her brother Wei, about the passion in her voice when she talked about changing healthcare, about the late nights they'd spent refining presentations, arguing about the best way to help people. He thought about Michael's evidence, the money trails that didn't make sense, the SEC's suspicions. He thought about his father, dying while waiting for help, about doing the right thing even when it was hard. I believe, Ethan said slowly, choosing each word with care, that Mrs. Ashford Chen is someone who wants to do good in the world. I also believe she's someone who's willing to bend rules, navigate legal gray areas, and use complex structures to achieve her objectives. Whether those structures cross the line into illegality, I can't say. But I can say this: she scared me. Not because she was cruel, but because she was so convinced that her ends justified any means. And that kind of certainty, coupled with that much power, is dangerous. Isabella stood abruptly. Are we done here? Because I'm not going to sit and listen to a disgruntled former employee make pseudo-philosophical pronouncements about my character. We're not quite done, Agent Morrison said. Mr. Reed, did you bring the documentation Mr. Chen suggested you might have access to? This was the gamble, the thing Ethan and Michael had planned late into the night. I did, Ethan said, pulling a flash drive from his pocket. During my time working with Mrs. Ashford Chen, I created backup copies of files I was working on. Standard practice for anyone who's ever lost work to a computer crash. Those files include email chains, financial reports I was asked to review, and presentation materials that reference the Foundation's funding sources. Castellano's face went pale. Those files are proprietary. Mr. Reed had no right to retain copies after his employment ended. Actually, Michael Park said, speaking up for the first time, under whistleblower protection laws, Mr. Reed is entitled to retain documentation relevant to potential illegal activity. And before you argue that he didn't know about potential illegal activity at the time, I'd point out that Mrs. Ashford Chen's termination of his employment immediately after he raised questions about finances suggests she considered him a threat. This is absurd, Isabella snapped. You're twisting everything. Mrs. Ashford Chen, Agent Morrison said firmly, please sit down and let us examine the materials. If they contain nothing incriminating, you have nothing to worry about. But Isabella didn't sit down. Instead, she looked at Ethan with an expression of such profound betrayal that he felt it like a physical wound. I trusted you, she said quietly. I shared things with you I've never shared with anyone. I gave you opportunities that could have changed your life. And this is how you repay me. You threatened to destroy my reputation, Ethan said, matching her quiet tone. You dangled my future like a carrot, then tried to use it as a weapon when I didn't comply. You asked me to lie to federal investigators. So yes, Isabella, this is how I repay you. With honesty, with refusal to be complicit, with the same courage you claimed to admire when I spoke Mandarin to you in that restaurant. For a moment, something flickered in Isabella's eyes, pain perhaps or recognition. Then it was gone, replaced by cold calculation. You'll regret this, she said. I promise you, Ethan Morrison, you will regret this for the rest of your life. She turned to her attorney. We're leaving. If the SEC wants to examine any materials, they can do so through proper legal channels with appropriate warrants. Castellano gathered his things, clearly eager to leave before the situation deteriorated further. My client will not be answering any additional questions without proper legal proceedings. As they reached the door, Isabella paused and turned back to Ethan one final time. You know what the saddest part is, she said. You could have been different. You could have been someone who understood that changing the world requires getting your hands dirty. Instead, you're just another idealist who'll accomplish nothing while feeling morally superior about it. Then she was gone. The silence that followed felt heavy with implications. Well, Agent Morrison said finally, that was dramatic. Mr. Reed will need to examine these files in detail. This could take several days. Are you prepared for the possibility that Mrs. Ashford Chen will retaliate against you? She already has, Ethan said, thinking of the video, the threats, the promised letter of recommendation that would never be sent. And she probably will again, but I'm prepared to deal with the consequences. Agent Park looked at him with something like respect. That took courage. Not many people are willing to stand up to someone with Isabella Zhao Williams's resources and reputation. After the investigators left to begin examining the files, Ethan sat alone in the conference room with Michael. "You did good," Michael said. "Really good. You gave them enough to pursue the investigation without making claims you couldn't back up. That was smart." Ethan didn't feel smart. He felt exhausted and scared, and like he'd just burned down his entire future for the sake of principles that might not even matter in the end. "What happens now?" he asked. "Now the SEC does their work. If they find evidence of illegal activity, they'll pursue charges. If they don't, the investigation gets closed and Isabella goes free. Either way, you've done your part. And if they don't find anything, if it turns out she was telling the truth and I just destroyed a legitimate charitable initiative because I was paranoid." Michael was quiet for a moment. "Then you live with that. But Ethan, you made the best decision you could with the information you had. That's all anyone can do." Ethan's phone buzzed. A text from his sister. "How did it go?" "I think I just ended my career before it started," Ethan typed back. Maya's response was immediate. "Or you just started a different one. Proud of you, big brother." Ethan left the SEC building and emerged into bright afternoon sunshine that felt incongruous with his mood. The city moved around him with its usual indifference, people rushing to meetings, vendors selling hot dogs, taxis honking in eternal frustration. Somewhere in this city, Isabella Zhao Williams was probably planning his destruction, calling in favors, mobilizing her attorneys, preparing to bury him so thoroughly that no medical school would ever consider his application. But somewhere else in this city, there were also people who needed the kind of healthcare reform Isabella had promised. People who were dying because they couldn't access basic medical care. People whose stories deserved to be more than just fundraising tools. Ethan pulled out his phone and called Mount Sinai's admissions office. "Hi," he said when someone answered. "My name is Ethan Morrison. I applied for admission last year and was waitlisted. I'd like to schedule a meeting to discuss my application for next year's cycle." The woman on the other end sounded surprised. "We don't typically do preliminary meetings for applicants who haven't submitted current applications." "I understand, but I have a unique situation I'd like to discuss. I've recently been involved in a federal investigation of financial fraud, and I want to be upfront about how that might affect my candidacy." There was a long pause. "That is unique. Let me transfer you to Dean Rodriguez's assistant." As Ethan waited on hold, he realized something. He'd spent 3 years trying to become the candidate medical schools wanted, hiding his struggles, glossing over his failures, presenting a polished version of himself that bore only superficial resemblance to who he actually was. Maybe it was time to try being himself instead. "Mr. Reed," a new voice came on the line. "This is Dean Rodriguez. My assistant tells me you have an unusual situation to discuss." "That's one way to put it," Ethan said, and for the first time in a long time he smiled. "How much time do you have?" Part 8, Strange Understanding. 3 weeks later, Ethan sat in a coffee shop in Brooklyn, reviewing notes on his laptop while rain drummed against the windows. He'd been living in limbo since the SEC interview, not quite employed, not quite unemployed, existing in a strange space between his old life and whatever came next. The flash drive he'd given the investigators had contained exactly what he'd promised: email chains, financial reports, presentation materials. What Ethan hadn't told them was that he'd spent his last night working for Isabella, making copies of everything he could access, driven by an instinct he hadn't fully understood at the time. That instinct had proven correct. The door chimed, and Ethan looked up to see Michael Park enter, shaking rain from his umbrella. He looked different than the last time they'd met, less hunted, more confident. He carried a thick folder under his arm. "Sorry I'm late," Michael said, sliding into the seat across from Ethan. The SEC briefing ran long. Ethan's heart rate increased, and Michael set the folder on the table. They're pursuing charges: wire fraud, money laundering, tax evasion. They found enough in those files to build a case. Ethan felt something twist in his chest, relief mixed with guilt. So I was right to come forward. You were right, Michael confirmed. Isabella had been using the foundation as a pass-through for various business interests, hiding income and manipulating donor contributions for personal gain. The healthcare initiative was real, that part was true, but it was also providing cover for a sophisticated fraud operation. How much money are we talking about? Approximately $43 million over the past 6 years. Michael opened the folder, revealing pages of financial documentation. She was brilliant about it, I'll give her that. Everything had plausible explanations if you looked at it superficially. It was only when you started connecting pieces across multiple entities that the pattern emerged. Ethan thought about Isabella's story about her brother, about her passion for healthcare reform. Do you think any of it was genuine, her commitment to helping people? Michael considered the question. I think people are complicated. Isabella probably did want to change healthcare, but she also wanted to profit from it and wasn't particularly concerned about legal niceties standing in her way. Humans contain multitudes, even the fraudulent ones. What happens to the healthcare initiative now? That's actually why I wanted to meet. Michael pulled out another document. The foundation's board is being restructured. New leadership, new oversight, new funding models. They want to salvage the initiative if possible. The technology Isabella's team developed is genuinely innovative, and it would be a shame to let it die because of her crimes. He slid the paper across to Ethan. It was a job offer. They want you to join as Director of Community Engagement, Michael said. The board was impressed by your testimony. They see you as someone who actually understands the communities this work is meant to serve, someone with integrity. Ethan stared at the document. Salary, $95,000. Benefits, real responsibility for shaping how the healthcare technology reached the people who needed it most. I don't have my degree yet, Ethan said. I'm not qualified. You're more qualified than you think, and the board agrees. Michael leaned back. Ethan, you could actually make the difference Isabella kept talking about but never fully committed to. You could ensure this technology reaches the people who need it instead of just being another feel-good story for wealthy donors. Ethan's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. We need to talk, V. He showed Michael the message. She's been texting periodically. I haven't responded. Probably smart, though I imagine she's going to be very interested in this job offer. As if summoned by their conversation, the coffee shop door opened and Isabella Zhao Williams walked in. She looked different, still expensive, still polished, but there was something diminished about her presence. The certainty that had always surrounded her like armor seemed cracked, letting through hints of the vulnerable human beneath. She spotted Ethan and Michael, and for a moment Ethan thought she might turn around and leave. Instead, she approached their table. Mind if I join you? Isabella asked. Actually, yes, Michael said flatly. Given that you're currently under federal investigation, any contact with witnesses could be seen as tampering. Isabella ignored him, her eyes fixed on Ethan. 5 minutes, please. Ethan should have said no. Every instinct screamed that engaging with her was a mistake, but he found himself nodding, and Michael reluctantly excused himself to take a phone call outside. Isabella sat down, and up close, Ethan could see the toll the past few weeks had taken. Faint lines around her eyes that makeup couldn't quite hide, a tightness in her jaw that suggested sleepless nights. You destroyed me, she said without preamble. Everything I built over 30 years gone. My reputation, my companies, my credibility, all because you decided to play hero. I didn't destroy you, Ethan said quietly. You destroyed yourself. I just refuse to help you cover it up. Isabella laughed, brittle as breaking glass. Still so righteous. Tell me, Ethan, do you feel good about what you've done? Do you sleep well at night knowing you've taken down a woman who was trying to change health care? I sleep fine knowing I told the truth to federal investigators. What you were trying to change was your bank balance, Isabella. The healthcare reform was just good PR. That's not fair. Isn't it? Ethan leaned forward. $43 million, Isabella. That's how much you diverted from charitable purposes to your own interests. So don't sit here and tell me this was about your brother or helping people. This was about you building an empire and using other people's pain as construction material. Isabella's composure cracked. You don't understand. You've never had to fight for everything like I have. Never had to prove yourself in rooms full of men who assumed you'd slept your way to the table. Never had to be twice as smart and work twice as hard just to be seen as half as good. You're right. I don't understand that particular struggle, Ethan said. But I understand being underestimated. I understand doors being closed because of who I am rather than what I'm capable of. And you know what I didn't do? I didn't decide that justified breaking the law and betraying people who trusted me. So noble, Isabella said bitterly. So pure. Where did that nobility get you, Ethan? You still don't have your medical school acceptance. You still don't have the opportunities I could have given you. All you have is your precious integrity, which, last I checked, doesn't pay rent or change systems or save lives. Ethan pulled out the job offer Michael had given him and slid it across the table. Actually, I might have all of those things. The Foundation's new board wants me to help ensure your healthcare technology reaches the communities that need it. They think someone with integrity is exactly what the initiative needs. Isabella stared at the document, something like pain crossing her face. You're taking my work, my vision, everything I created. I'm taking responsibility for making sure it actually helps people instead of just helping you. Ethan stood. That's what you should have done from the beginning. If you'd actually focused on the mission instead of using it as cover for fraud, you could have been the hero you pretended to be. I could have been. Isabella looked up at him, and for the first time Ethan saw genuine remorse in her eyes. I was going to be Ethan. That was always the plan. Build the empire, acquire the resources, then use them to actually make a difference. The fraud was temporary, just a way to accelerate the timeline. That's what they all say. Just this once, just until I'm secure, just until I have enough power to do good. But it never works that way. The compromises become habit. The justifications become easier, until you wake up one day and realize you've become exactly what you were fighting against. Ethan moved toward the door, then paused. For what it's worth, I believe you loved your brother. I believe you genuinely wanted to honor his memory, but you dishonored it instead. You used his death to justify actions he would have been ashamed of, and that's the real tragedy here. He left Isabella sitting alone at the table, and this time he didn't look back. Outside, Michael was waiting under an awning, protected from the rain. That looked intense, Michael said. It was necessary, Ethan replied. I needed to say those things, for me, not for her. So, what do you think about the job offer? Ethan looked at the paper in his hand, at the opportunity that had emerged from the wreckage of Isabella's empire. I think I'm going to accept it, with one condition. What's that? I want to restructure how we measure success. Not by how much money we raise or how many donors we impress, by how many lives we actually improve. Real metrics, real accountability, real commitment to the communities we're supposed to serve. Michael smiled. I think the board will be very amenable to that. When can you start? Tomorrow, Ethan said. But first, I have something else I need to do. That evening, Ethan sat in Dean Rodriguez's office at Mount Sinai, his application materials spread across the desk between them. He'd been honest about everything. His involvement in the SEC investigation, his time working for Isabella, his doubts and struggles and failures. Dean Rodriguez, a woman in her 60s with kind eyes and a reputation for seeing potential in unconventional candidates, had listened to his entire story without interruption. "That's quite a journey," she said finally. "Most applicants try to present themselves as flawless. You've done the opposite." "I'm tired of pretending to be someone I'm not," Ethan said. "If that means medical school isn't in my future, I can accept that. But I needed to try one more time as my actual self." Dean Rodriguez smiled. "Mr. Reed, I'm going to tell you something that might surprise you. We don't want flawless candidates. We want human beings who understand that medicine is messy and complicated and requires moral courage. Everything you've described, standing up to powerful interests, prioritizing truth over personal gain, struggling with difficult ethical choices, that's exactly what we need in physicians." Ethan felt his breath catch. "Does that mean?" "It means I'm recommending you for early admission to next year's class, pending completion of some prerequisite coursework and a formal interview with the full admissions committee. But Ethan, I'll be honest with you, I'm going to advocate strongly for your acceptance. We need doctors who have proven they'll do the right thing even when it costs them everything." Ethan couldn't speak for a moment. When he finally found his voice, all he could say was, "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. Medical school is brutal. It will test you in ways you can't imagine. But I think you're ready for it, more ready than you know." Walking out of Mount Sinai that evening, Ethan felt something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. Real, genuine hope that didn't require compromising his values or becoming someone he wasn't. His phone rang, his mother. "Ethan, baby, are you sitting down?" "I'm walking." "But I can stop. What's going on?" "I just got off the phone with your sister. She told me everything, the investigation, the job offer, all of it. Ethan Morrison, why didn't you tell your mother you were going through all this?" "I didn't want you to worry." "Too late for that. I've been worrying about you since the day you were born. But Ethan, I need you to know something. Your father would be so proud of you. So proud." Ethan felt tears prick his eyes. "You think so?" "I know so. He always said that the measure of a man isn't what he accomplishes when it's easy, but what he stands for when it's hard. You stood for truth and justice, baby, even when it cost you. That's the kind of man your father raised you to be." After hanging up, Ethan stood on the corner of 98th and Madison, letting the city flow around him. Somewhere in this city, Isabella was probably consulting with lawyers, preparing her defense, figuring out how to salvage what she could from the ruins of her empire. Somewhere else, Michael Park was filing reports and building cases and making sure justice was served. And here Ethan stood, on the edge of a new chapter, having lost everything he thought he wanted and found something better, himself. His phone buzzed one final time. A text from Jennifer Wu, Isabella's former assistant. "I heard you're joining the foundation. Congratulations. Also thought you should know that Isabella's healthcare technology, it actually works. The prototype was tested in 3 rural clinics last week. Saved 2 lives already. Whatever else she was, she got that part right. Maybe you can make sure it reaches the people who need it. J." Ethan looked at the message for a long time. Then he typed back, "That's the plan." He had a lot of work to do. Medical school to prepare for. A new job to start. A healthcare initiative to rebuild from the ground up, this time with integrity as its foundation rather than fraud. It wouldn't be easy. Nothing worth doing ever was. But for the first time in 3 years, Ethan Morrison knew exactly who he was and what he stood for. And that, he realized, was worth more than all the opportunities Isabella Zhao Williams could have ever given him. Part 9. Patience is a Virtue. 6 months later, Ethan stood in a small clinic in rural Kentucky, watching Dr. Sarah Chen demonstrate the portable diagnostic device that had emerged from Isabella's now restructured initiative. The clinic served a community of 8,000 people spread across 3 counties, most of whom had limited access to advanced medical care. "This is remarkable," Dr. Chen said, running the device over a patient's chest. The screen lit up with real-time imaging of the patient's heart, detailed enough to detect abnormalities that would normally require a hospital visit and expensive equipment. "We've been doing preliminary diagnostics in 5 minutes that used to take days and trips to facilities over an hour away." Ethan made notes on his tablet, documenting the implementation for the Foundation's quarterly report. This was his 8th site visit in the past 4 months. Part of his role as Director of Community Engagement was ensuring the technology actually reached the communities that needed it and worked in real-world conditions. "How are the training materials working?" Ethan asked. "Any gaps we need to address?" "They're good, but we could use more troubleshooting guides for when the devices lose calibration. It's happened twice, and both times we had to wait for tech support rather than fixing it ourselves." Ethan added that to his growing list of improvements. Unlike Isabella's original vision, which had focused on impressive demonstrations for donors rather than practical usability, Ethan insisted on iterating based on feedback from actual users. It made the process slower, but the results were better. His phone buzzed. A text from Maya turned on CNN. Ethan excused himself and pulled out his phone, finding a live stream of CNN. The headline made his chest tighten. "Isabella Zhao Williams sentenced to 18 months in federal prison." He turned up the volume. The reporter stood outside the federal courthouse in Manhattan, rain falling in the background. In a stunning fall from grace, billionaire entrepreneur Isabella Zhao Williams was sentenced today to 18 months in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release. She was also ordered to pay $43 million in restitution and fined an additional $5 million. The charges stem from her fraudulent use of the Ashford Chen Foundation. Ethan watched as footage showed Isabella leaving the courthouse, surrounded by attorneys and photographers. She looked small somehow, diminished in ways that had nothing to do with her physical size. Their eyes met through the camera for just a moment, and Ethan felt a complicated surge of emotions: vindication, sadness, relief, regret. "You okay?" Dr. Chen asked, appearing beside him. "Yeah," Ethan said, shutting off his phone. "Just closure, I guess." That evening, Ethan returned to his small apartment in Washington Heights, not much better than his old place, but he'd chosen to keep his expenses low while saving for medical school. He was set to start at Mount Sinai in the fall, having completed his prerequisite courses while working full-time at the Foundation. He was making dinner, nothing fancy, just pasta and vegetables, when someone knocked on his door. Through the peephole, Ethan saw Jennifer Wu. "Jennifer," he said, opening the door, "what are you doing here?" She held up a manila envelope. "Isabella asked me to give this to you. I quit working for her after the indictment, but she called me yesterday and asked if I'd deliver this. Said it was important." Ethan took the envelope cautiously, as if it might explode. "Did she say what it is?" "No, but Ethan, I think you should read it. Whatever else Isabella was, she cared about you, in her own complicated way." Jennifer smiled sadly. "Good luck with medical school. You're going to be a great doctor." After she left, Ethan sat on his couch for a long time, just staring at the envelope. Finally, he opened it. Inside was a letter, handwritten on Isabella's personal stationery. "Ethan, by the time you read this, I'll be beginning my sentence. 18 months. I've faced hostile boardrooms, cutthroat competitors, and my own grief. But somehow, the prospect of prison terrifies me more than any of that. I'm writing to you because you're the only person who might understand what I need to say. Not to excuse what I did, I'm past that point, but to explain it maybe, or at least to try. When Wei died, something broke inside me. Not in the dramatic way people describe trauma in movies, more like a subtle crack in a foundation that you don't notice until the whole structure starts to shift. I became obsessed with control, with ensuring I'd never be powerless again, with accumulating enough money and influence that the world would bend to my will instead of the other way around. The fraud started small. A little creative accounting here, a strategic omission there. Each compromise made the next one easier. I told myself it was temporary, that once I had enough resources, I'd start operating with complete integrity. But enough kept moving further away. There was always one more deal, one more acquisition, one more opportunity that required me to bend the rules just a little bit more. You asked me once if the healthcare initiative was real. The answer is yes, and also no. It was real in that I genuinely wanted to develop technology that could help people. It was not real in that I was using it as cover for other activities. Both things were true simultaneously. Humans are like that, I think, capable of holding contradictory truths at the same time. What I regret most isn't getting caught. It's that I had a chance to do genuine good in the world, and I corrupted it. I had resources, knowledge, connections, everything needed to make a real difference. And I squandered it because I couldn't let go of my need for control and my conviction that the ends justified any means. You showed me a different way. You proved that integrity doesn't have to be weakness, that standing up for truth doesn't require sacrificing effectiveness. I resented you for it at the time, fought against it, but in the quiet moments since my sentencing, I've come to realize you were right. I'm including something with this letter, a complete list of every person and organization I've wronged through my actions. Names, amounts, details of how I manipulated or deceived them. I'm sending copies to the prosecutors as well, but I wanted you to have one. Some of these people haven't been contacted by investigators yet. They deserve to know what happened and to seek restitution. I'm also including the original research notes for the diagnostic technology, not the sanitized version we showed to donors, but the raw data including all the failures and setbacks. You'll find that the technology works better than we publicly claimed in some ways, and worse in others. Use this information to make the initiative truly effective instead of just impressive. Finally, I want you to know that the letter of recommendation I wrote for you was genuine. Every word of it was true. You are brilliant, compassionate, and morally courageous. You will be an extraordinary physician. I'm sorry I tried to use that recommendation as a weapon. You deserved better. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even want it, really. But I hope you'll accept my apology for the ways I tried to manipulate and use you. You were right to resist, right to report what you saw, right to choose integrity over opportunity. Be the doctor I know you can be, Ethan. Save the lives I failed to save. Change the systems I only pretended to care about changing. And maybe, occasionally, remember that even people who do terrible things can still recognize goodness when they see it. You made me want to be better than I was. I failed at that. But perhaps my failure can serve as a reminder of what happens when we lose sight of what matters. The world needs more people like you, fewer people like me. With genuine respect and regret, Isabella. Ethan read the letter 3 times, feeling tears blur the words. Then he carefully folded it and placed it back in the envelope along with the research notes and the list of Isabella's victims. He thought about calling someone, Maya, his mother, Michael Park, but this moment felt private, sacred almost, a closing of a chapter that had changed his life in ways he was still understanding. His phone buzzed. An email from Mount Sinai's admissions office with the subject line, "Welcome to the class of 2029. Ethan opened it with shaking hands. Dear Ethan, on behalf of the admissions committee, I am delighted to officially confirm your acceptance to the Mount Sinai School of Medicine. Your journey to this point has been remarkable, and we are excited to welcome you to our community of future physicians. Your orientation begins on August 15th. Ethan stopped reading and just sat there, letting the reality wash over him. He'd made it. Despite everything, the rejections, the detours, the impossible choices, he'd made it. He picked up his phone and called his mother. "Ethan," she answered, "everything okay, baby?" "Mom," he said, his voice breaking slightly, "I got in. I'm going to be a doctor." The sound of his mother's joy, the crying and praising and thanking God, filled his small apartment with warmth. When she finally calmed down enough to speak coherently, she said, "Your father would be so proud, Ethan. I wish he could see this day." "I think he can," Ethan said quietly. "I think he knows." After hanging up, Ethan walked to the small shrine he kept on his bookshelf. A photo of his father in his younger years, smiling that crooked smile Ethan had inherited. Beside it was the ambulance bill from the night he died, kept as a reminder of why Ethan had chosen medicine in the first place. "We did it, Dad," Ethan said softly. "It took longer than expected, had some detours, made some mistakes, but we got here." That weekend, Ethan organized a celebration at a community center in the neighborhood where he'd grown up. Not a fancy affair, just folding tables with homemade food, a few decorations his mother insisted on, and the people who'd supported him through the years of struggle. Maya flew up from Atlanta, bringing her husband and 2 kids. His mother's church friends came, the ones who'd been praying for his medical school acceptance for years. His old roommate from Columbia showed up with a bottle of cheap champagne and embarrassing stories from their undergraduate days. Michael Park came too, bringing news that the SEC had successfully recovered most of the diverted funds and was distributing them to the affected parties. "Your testimony was crucial," Michael told him. "We couldn't have built the case without you." Jennifer Wu attended with several other former Ashford Chen Foundation employees who'd helped expose the fraud. They'd formed their own advocacy group focused on promoting transparency in nonprofit organizations. Even Dr. Chen from the Kentucky clinic sent a video message showing how the diagnostic devices were being used and the lives they were saving. "We've diagnosed and treated over 40 critical cases in the past 6 months," she said in the video. "Cases that would have gone undetected without this technology. Whatever it took to get here, it was worth it." As the evening wore on and people shared stories and laughter, Ethan found himself thinking about Isabella's letter, about how she'd had everything: resources, intelligence, opportunity, and had squandered it through choices that prioritized power over purpose. He thought about his own journey, the doors that had been slammed in his face, the years of rejection and struggle. At the time, it had felt like cosmic unfairness. Now he could see it as preparation. Every setback had taught him something. Every closed door had redirected him toward something better. "Speech," someone called out, and soon the entire room was chanting, "Speech, speech." Ethan stood reluctantly, suddenly aware of every eye on him. He'd never been comfortable with attention, preferring to work quietly in the background. But these people had earned the right to hear from him. "I'm not good at speeches," he began, and everyone laughed. "But I want to thank all of you for being here, for believing in me even when I stopped believing in myself, for supporting me through the years when it felt like I was walking uphill in the snow barefoot both ways." More laughter. "The past 6 months have taught me something important," Ethan continued. "I used to think success meant getting into medical school, becoming a doctor, proving everyone wrong who doubted me. But I've learned that success is actually about staying true to who you are, even when it's hard, even when it costs you, even when easier paths are available." He looked at his mother, tears streaming down her face. "My father died waiting for an ambulance. For years, I was angry about that. Angry at the system, at the response times, at the inequities that meant help came slower to our neighborhood than to wealthier ones. That anger drove me toward medicine, but it also made me bitter." Ethan took a breath. "Then I met someone who showed me what happens when anger and ambition mix with moral compromise. Someone brilliant and driven who could have changed the world but chose instead to game it for personal advantage. Watching her fall taught me that how we achieve our goals matters as much as whether we achieve them. So as I start medical school, I'm making a promise, not to all of you, though you're welcome to hold me to it, but to myself and to my father's memory. I will be a doctor who serves people, not institutions, who prioritizes patient care over profit, who treats the janitor with the same respect as the hospital administrator, who remembers that every person who walks through my door is someone's son or daughter, someone's parent or sibling, someone who deserves dignity and compassion along with medical expertise. His voice caught slightly. I will be the kind of doctor my father deserved but never got to see, and I will make sure that the next Ethan Morrison, the next kid from a neighborhood where ambulances come slow, doesn't have to wait 20 years to pursue their dream. The applause was thunderous, but what Ethan noticed most was the look on his mother's face, pure pride and love and relief that her son had made it through the darkness into light. Later, after most people had left and the cleanup was underway, Maya pulled Ethan aside. "I'm proud of you," she said simply. "Not because you got into medical school, though that's great, but because you chose integrity over opportunity. That's rare, Ethan. Don't ever forget how rare that is." It didn't feel rare at the time. It felt terrifying. The best choices usually do. Maya hugged him tightly. Dad would be bursting, probably organizing a parade, calling everyone he knew to brag about his doctor son. Ethan laughed through tears, probably wearing a shirt that said, "My son is a doctor 6 months before I actually graduate." Definitely that. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching their family clean up the celebration. Their mother was organizing leftovers with military precision. Maya's kids were playing with balloons. Life, continuing its messy, beautiful march forward. "Do you think Isabella will actually change?" Maya asked suddenly. "Or is this just another performance?" Ethan thought about the letter, about the research notes she'd included, about the list of people she'd wronged. "I think she's capable of change. Whether she'll actually do the work required is another question, but I hope she does. Not for her sake, for everyone else's. The world needs her talents pointing in the right direction." "That's generous of you." Maybe, or maybe I've just learned that people are complicated. They can be multiple things at once, brilliant and corrupt, generous and selfish, capable of both great harm and great good. Isabella taught me that, even if she didn't mean to. Ethan's phone buzzed. An email from the Foundation's board with the subject line, "Technology Expansion Proposal." He opened it to find a detailed plan for expanding the diagnostic device program to 15 additional clinics across 6 states. The proposal included everything Ethan had recommended: comprehensive training, on-site support, regular maintenance protocols, and genuine partnership with community healthcare providers rather than top-down implementation. Attached was a note from the board chair. "This is the kind of work Isabella should have been doing from the start. Thank you for showing us what genuine commitment to community health looks like. We're excited to move forward with your vision." Ethan showed Maya the email. "I guess this is what redemption looks like. Not dramatic or cinematic, just steady work day after day trying to do things right." "Sounds perfect for you," Maya said. "The steady, reliable brother who always shows up and does the work." On Monday morning, Ethan started his final week at the Foundation before transitioning to medical school. He'd agreed to stay on as a consultant, helping guide the initiative's expansion while he pursued his studies. It would be demanding, balancing medical school with part-time consulting, but Ethan had learned he worked best when he had purpose driving him forward. He spent the morning reviewing implementation reports from the various clinic sites, noting successes and challenges. Then he had a video call with Dr. Chen in Kentucky, discussing modifications to the training program based on her team's experience. Around noon, Michael Park stopped by his office. "Got a minute?" Michael asked. "Sure, what's up?" Michael sat down, looking uncomfortable. "I've been offered a position in the Justice Department, Civil Rights Division. They want someone with experience investigating financial crimes against vulnerable communities." "Michael, that's amazing. Congratulations." "Thanks, but I'm not sure if I should take it. The foundation still needs legal oversight during this transition period, and I feel responsible." "Take the job," Ethan interrupted firmly. "The foundation will be fine. We'll find good legal counsel, but you have a chance to do the kind of work you're passionate about on a much larger scale. Don't let misplaced loyalty stop you." Michael smiled. "You sound different than you did 6 months ago, more confident, more certain." "I feel different. Losing everything I thought I wanted gave me clarity about what I actually need." Ethan gestured around his modest office. "This isn't glamorous. The salary isn't impressive. I'm not building an empire or making headlines. But I'm doing work that matters, helping people who need it and sleeping well at night. Turns out that's enough." After Michael left, Ethan spent the afternoon writing his final report as a full-time employee of the foundation. He detailed the progress made in the past 6 months, the challenges that remained, and his recommendations for future development. It was thorough, honest, and optimistic about what the initiative could become with proper management and genuine commitment to its stated mission. As he was preparing to leave for the day, his phone rang. The caller ID showed Federal Correctional Institution, Danbury. Ethan hesitated, then answered, "Hello." "Ethan?" Isabella's voice sounded different, smaller, less certain. "They give us limited phone time. I hope you don't mind me using some of it to call you." "How are you?" Ethan asked, because what else could he say? "Surviving, adapting, discovering that I'm not as special as I thought I was. Prison has a way of equalizing everyone." She paused. "Did you receive my letter?" "I did, and the research notes. They've been incredibly helpful for refining the implementation strategy." "Good, that's good." Another pause, longer this time. "I heard you got into Mount Sinai. Congratulations. You deserved it." "Thank you." "Ethan, I need to ask you something. The list I gave you of people I wronged, have you shared it with them? Given them the information they need to seek restitution?" "I gave the list to the prosecutors. They're handling notifications through proper channels." "Right, proper channels." Isabella laughed softly. "You know what's funny? I spent 30 years figuring out how to work around proper channels, and now I'm discovering that they exist for good reasons. Who would have thought?" "It's not too late to change," Ethan said quietly. 18 months isn't forever. You'll have opportunities afterward to do things differently." "Will I, or will I just be the criminal billionaire, forever tainted by her conviction? I'm genuinely asking, Ethan. You're the only person I trust to tell me the truth." Ethan thought about his answer carefully. "You'll be exactly what you choose to be. Yes, you'll have that conviction on your record. Yes, some doors will be closed, but you still have resources, knowledge, and connections. You could use them to actually help people instead of helping yourself. Or you could spend the rest of your life feeling sorry for yourself and blaming others for consequences you earned. Choice is yours." Isabella was quiet for so long that Ethan thought she'd hung up. Then, "You're right. You're absolutely right. And that's why I called, actually. I wanted to tell you that I'm using my time here to develop a new business plan. Not for profit, genuinely nonprofit this time. Using everything I learned about healthcare technology to create open-source diagnostic tools that anyone can manufacture and distribute. No patents, no proprietary software, no profit motive. Just good technology made available to communities that need it." "That sounds ambitious." "It is, probably too ambitious. But I have 18 months with very little to do except think and plan. Might as well aim high." She paused. "Would you be willing to review the plan when I have something drafted? Not to endorse it, I wouldn't ask that of you. just to tell me if it's actually focused on community needs or if I'm falling back into old patterns of prioritizing optics over substance. Ethan considered the request. Every instinct warned him to maintain distance, to avoid being pulled back into Isabella's orbit. But he also heard genuine humility in her voice, a willingness to be held accountable that hadn't been there before. "Send me the plan when you're ready," Ethan said. "I'll review it honestly. But Isabella, I'm going to be very busy with medical school. My capacity to consult will be limited." "I understand. And Ethan, thank you for everything, for being willing to destroy my empire to protect the truth, for refusing to let me corrupt you, for showing me what integrity actually looks like instead of just talking about it." Her voice caught. "You were a better teacher than I deserved." After hanging up, Ethan sat in his office as the sun set over Manhattan, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. He thought about the journey that had brought him here, from waiter to whistleblower to advocate to future doctor. He thought about his father, who died waiting for help. He thought about Isabella's brother Wei, who died waiting for technology. He thought about all the people who died waiting for systems to change, for help to arrive, for someone to care enough to do the hard work of actually making things better. And he made a silent promise to them all. Their deaths wouldn't be in vain. He would be the doctor who showed up, the advocate who pushed for change, the voice that insisted vulnerable communities deserved the same quality of care as wealthy ones. Not because it was easy, not because it would make him rich or famous, but because it was right. Ethan packed up his office, turned off the lights, and headed home to his small apartment. Tomorrow he'd continue the work of expanding the healthcare initiative. Next month he'd start medical school. In the years to come, he'd treat patients and train residents and fight endless battles against bureaucracy and indifference. But tonight, Ethan Morrison was simply a 27-year-old man who'd faced impossible choices and discovered that integrity wasn't weakness, it was strength. And that, he thought as he stepped into the warm summer evening, was a lesson worth every hardship it had taken to learn. What would you do if you had Isabella's second chance? How would you use your skills and resources to make amends and create genuine change? Sometimes the longest journey isn't to a destination. It's to becoming the person you were always meant to be. Ethan's story reminds us that every choice matters, every stand we take shapes who we become, and doing the right thing, even when it costs us everything, is what transforms us from survivors into heroes. If this story resonated with you, drop a comment below about a time you chose integrity over convenience. Your story might inspire someone else facing a similar crossroads.